Anytime, happy to do it. I will never tell anybody.
Hey, you get a fist bump. She gets a big hug. Clearly, COVID doesn't know hugs. There's evidently, you need to start showering.
Excellent. No worries. No
That's
worries.
great.
Thank you.
Well, that's a good thing.
Hi. How are you, sir? All right. Good to see you, Mr. Jones.
How are you? Good to see you. So good. How about yourself? It's, I couldn't ask for better.
You like her?
I love it.
That's what I said. I don't think.
For the members of QQ who are on the Zoom with us, can you give me confirmation that you can see our screen? Little thumbs up, maybe?
Oh, is it time?
Thank you.
Are we ready to go?
So I'm just confirming that the live stream is working. Give me one
All right,
moment.
Very good. Just let me know. We'll get started.
It is.
Mr. Rowe, how are you, sir? So good to see you. Outstanding. And this is our annual meeting. Am I right? Can't get anything past me.
Try as we might.
So I had to put out. Yeah.
All right, Mr. Chair, we are ready.
All right. So this is the annual meeting of the Children's Services Council of Leon County. I'll ask that the council come to order. Ms. McPhail, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Mr. Marco Bryant,
Here.
Superintendent Hannah,
Here.
Miss Liza McFadden, Vice Chair Connor, Mr. Mitchell,
Here.
Dr. Glenn,
Yeah.
Mr. Watts, School Board Member Jones, Chair Sostrom.
Present.
You have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Excellent. Commissioner Cummings under the weather today, so is unable to be with us. We wish her quick getting back to us, quick getting back to health. First item on our agenda, next item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. You should each have a package with our agenda, a little bit long today. Any discussion of the agenda?
And I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion, any objection? Seeing no objection, the agenda is approved. Next item, approval of the minutes, which is at page 3 of the package. Minutes from our meeting of December the 16th.
I'll move the minutes of the meeting of December 16th.
Moved by Mr. Mitchell,
Second.
second by Ms. McFadden. Any discussion or objection? Seeing none, we'll show the minutes as approved. Next item is general public comment. I think we have an official public comment policy now, but it's pretty much the way we've been doing it. Please fill out a comment card if you wish to be heard. Address your comments to the committee as a whole and make yourself heard. Ms. McPhail, do we have any comment cards?
None at this time, Mr. Chair.
No comment cards at this. Bringing us to Executive Director's report, no longer the interim administrator's report. Ms. Green, you are recognized.
Thank you, Judge Sostrom, and good afternoon, all council members. Are we on?
Now you are.
Is this thing on?
Check.
It is I am so happy to come before you today as your first executive director for the Children's Services Council of Leon County. And I promise not to speak long, and I'll try to make that a habit. So just a couple of things to bring to your attention. The annual report is on page 11 of your packet. If you go through that and have any issues, just let me or Holly know. There is information in your packet on the Early Learning Coalition of the Big Bend. If you remember in prior meetings, they have a statutory requirement and in their bylaws to have a member of the Children's Services Council serve on their board. The information is there in the packet. There was a very short discussion last meeting. If you will look at that and see if any of you are so inclined and can fit that in your schedule, then we can move forward and you can contact me. I do want to let you know, though, if in fact that cannot happen, I can be the designee to that coalition. It meets 4 times a year. So if I don't hear from anyone, then I will go ahead and fill that out and become a part of that coalition and just report back. Next, Terence Watts, Councilmember Terence Watts, quasi leads the Circuit 2 Alliance that is convened by the Department of Children and Families. I did have a chance to do a brief presentation on the last meeting and would love to have council participation on that council, on that alliance as well. I do plan to attend those regularly, but I also believe it would be great, as does Councilmember Watts, to have a member of the council sit on there as well. I will tell you, I did get a question, Councilmember Watts, about whether it has to be the same council member for every meeting, or can it be rotating such that council members can kind of come in and come out?
Perfect, yes. So it can be rotated. We can identify someone, have a designated person as well, and we can rotate. So that is completely fine.
Okay, so with that, I do not mind, and of course feel that it is my job to be a person that attends those for this council regularly, but I will send those meeting invites out. And if you choose to attend, you can let me know, and we'll be sure that that is acknowledged at every meeting. Those are on a quarterly basis as well. I have a couple of more things that are not in the packet, just things that I wanted to let you know. When we get to the treasurer's report that Councilmember Mitchell will discuss, I do want to bring to your attention that we have completely paid our loan back to Leon County Commission. That was in total $150,000, and then there was $335.16 in interest. We did pay all of that off, so we are no longer in hock with the council. So we're very happy about that. We have listening sessions that we will start in March and April. I have dubbed those community conversations with the council. So keep that in mind, and we will get those to you. And that is your opportunity to interface with our communities all throughout the county. They will be publicly noticed. So if there are more than one council member there, that will not be a problem. So we want you to keep that in mind. Also want to let you know that I am officially on the hook at the bank for our bank account. And so all of that paperwork has been done. I am now on that account. Ted Granger is now off. He cried really hard when that happened, but I told him we had to do it. And that we have also transferred all but $150,000 from our checking account into our money market account. And there'll be some more discussion about investments, but we are going to, of course, have most of that sit in money market. So it will get some interest until we come up with an investment policy or some sort of asset management. Want to let you know that at the next meeting, I more than likely will be bringing a budget amendment, and that amendment will have to do with a proposed staffing plan. I am looking to present a draft organizational chart as well as a staffing plan for this year, next year, and possibly 24. And as well, that amendment will contain office setup. So we're in the process of looking at some rental spaces. We have some conversations we're going to have with one of our council members that had some gratis space. I will tell you, I didn't get a chance to say this to Mr. Mitchell when I met with him. I want to be sure that we are not in any situation where it can be misconstrued that there is some sort of alliance perceived with any of our possible investment partners, which is my name for those organizations and persons that will receive funding from this council. So I will bring that next month. I also want to bring to your attention that the Florida Coalition of Children has changed their name. And so they are now the Florida Alliance of Children's Councils and Trusts. They got a new website and everything. And so you might want to go online and just take a look at that. And then the very last thing I'd like to do is present to you the second staff member of the council, and that is our office manager, Ms. Jacinta Clay, who is sitting behind me. We did have open interviews, and Jacinta will come to us from Children's Home Society. I have had the pleasure of working with her. I think that you all will absolutely enjoy working with her as well. And now that we've got an office manager / executive assistant, we will really get into the nuts and bolts of getting the council established. So with that, Judge Sjostrom, I am open for any questions, and that is the end of my report.
Very well. Discussions, questions, comments. Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
Just a, thank you, Judge. Just a two requests. One, if you could send Jacinta's contact info, maybe as an email that we can just download into our contacts, and welcome aboard, Jacinta. And then the second thing is, likewise, if you could, on those community discussions with the council. As you know, this is something that I do want to participate in. And if you could send them as calendar invites as soon as you have the dates, that would also be terrific. And thank you. Thank you, Judge.
Absolutely.
Thanks. Any other discussion for the executive director? Yes, sir. You're recognized.
Is it appropriate for a motion at this time whereby Ms. Green would be authorized to be our designee for early learning coalition?
Seems like an appropriate time for a motion.
I'll tell you, on the Early Learning Coalition, I am happy to be the designee if there's not another taker. So I'm happy to do it.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Mitchell, and I'll get you that information.
Okay.
All right. Does that, Daryl, answer your question?
Sure, no problem. I thought, yeah, that's fine.
Fair enough. Maybe we can put it on the agenda and you after, between now and the next meeting, you can see if there's any other volunteers for any of those positions, and then we can put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
Absolutely. And I do plan to attend those as well. Of course, they are public meetings. And so I'll be there as a member of the public, not as a designee to the board.
Okay, I wanted to ask Terence, do you have a judge participating on the alliance?
I do not, but a statutory member from the judicial circuit is pursuing, so.
So I'll get to work. I'm doing assignments right now.
All right.
All right, thanks. All right, any other discussions for Ms. Green, questions for Ms. Green? Seeing no takers, we'll move on to committee reports. First committee report is the Bylaws Committee. Ms. McPhail, the Bylaws Committee, presentation of revised bylaws.
Thank you, Chair Sjostrom. We went over this in pretty in depth at our last meeting. In terms of what was changed and what was proposed. What is in your packet, accessible on page 23, will just be that final version of everything. If you want us to rehash the things that we talked about at the last meeting, I'm happy to do so, but it was all discussed at the last meeting, unless there were any additional changes. The one change that was made at the last meeting had to do with the terms of 4 officers originally, and you'll see in clause, give me one moment. In the clause, yeah, it's just everything's like back to front. There we go. Changing it from that everyone would serve a term. Previously, it said for 1 year, and then they could be eligible for an additional year. One of the suggestions during the last meeting was to drop the contingency of eligible for another year and just extend it to 2 years. So that was the last change that was made. And so that's the only thing that's not in track changes. We adopted that at the, we made that change at the last meeting. So now it's ready for your approval and discussion. And then we have formulated a resolution to formalize the adoption of those bylaws.
All right. So we got Hollywood, Ms. McPhail, we do have a couple of members here who were not here at the last meeting. So maybe just put you on the spot and see if you can just sort of summarize the changes.
Absolutely. So the primary changes that happened was not the current year withstanding, to move our annual meeting from January to the meeting in October so that it aligns with our fiscal year. That was the primary change. The second big change is that all of the organizational clauses that were previously in the bylaws were removed so that they're no longer in there. The next change that we talked about was adding the responsibilities for the treasurer. So it had, that we would have a chair and a vice chair and a treasurer. It was just adding and enumerating those responsibilities. And there was some slight changes to Article 3 around voting, relating to not just a simple majority, but an affirmative vote of 2/3 related to the hiring and dismissal of the executive director. That was stipulated, and there was an addition related to the DCF appointee not voting in the hiring and dismissal of the executive director. Previously in there, it talked about the judge not participating in issues related to setting of the ad valorem taxes. So that was one of the additions. And then under the kind of the big thing that switched was under committees, actually listing what the permanent committees are and what the responsibilities of those permanent committees would be. Those were the primary changes. And again, the only thing that was not in last meeting's version was related to the terms of office.
And what is the information regarding the terms of office?
Sure. So the terms of office previously was 1 year with the option to serve an additional year. And the recommendation at the last meeting was to make it just a 2-year term and strike the eligibility piece. Pardon me for one more moment. We did add we added the whole Article 8, which was the prohibition on lobbying. That was previously not there. And so we added that in as well.
Member Jones, does that answer your question?
I have an additional question. So what does that mean? A great number of us are appointed by different means, some by the governor, others by their election. So what is the application of that rule across those different appointing authorities?
So if I may, Judge.
Please, you're recognized.
So what basically will happen, and this happens normally in any organization, if a term expires and one of our council members who happens to be an officer leaves the council, then we would have to have the recommendation or a motion by the nominating committee to elect a new officer to complete that term. And then we move into the normal election of the officers. So that's what would happen.
I'm sorry, you're talking about the terms of the officers and not the appointees.
That is correct.
Terms of
Okay,
the
that-
officers.
Okay, I apologize. That was what I was unclear on.
Yes.
Okay.
For membership just on the council, it's listed in here in terms, and this is just officers that we're talking about, that's set statutorily, and we will respect those statutes, including vacancies. So
Okay.
for the example of the staggered terms for our first year, we would, for those that are not appointed through your judge, through the clerk, through the courts or through the schools, that we would go back to the county and they would start that process for each time that there's members rotating off. So this issue of 1 and 2 years is
Wow.
only for officers. And and I think we put in here as well, this came up, the nominations committee is just related to officers and not related to appointments beyond that.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Mitchell, you recognized.
Well, I really only had one question, but it may have turned into two, just based on a question or a comment Mr. Jones made. My question is, in Article 3 of the voting, when I guess the DCF appointee can't vote on the executive director, we changed from 50% plus 1 to 2/3. So we've sort of, by removing one, we've sort of we've gone from 50% plus 1 to 2/3. And if you really look at it, it's 7/9 now. So my suggestion would be that it is 2/3 of the eligible voters, which would be, it's really 6 of 9. that it would require to hire or fire.
That's why you're the treasurer.
I don't know. I couldn't believe I missed it the last time. I was like, how did I miss that?
You're in charge of math, Paul.
Yeah, I'm not a very good mathematician.
So in response, I show it amended on Article 3 voting, Clause E, striking the word serving and replacing it with the word eligible.
Eligible, fair enough.
And
So we'll treat that as a motion. Is there a second?
I'm sorry, who made the motion?
I'll make
okay.
a motion. Yes.
So it would be to approve the resolution or approve the amended bylaws.
The amended bylaws.
Amend it, so then we're
And then
gonna fix it to
we'll-
And
amend
then
it. We're
we'll-
fix-
Perfect, thank you.
Yes. So has a motion been moved and second? Any discussion or objection to the adding the word eligible, changing out the word eligible? Seeing no objections, so we'll show that the proposed resolution amended.
The second, go ahead, Ms. Pam.
No, I'm just making sure we were just motioning to approve that change.
Yes, ma'am. We're not to the resolution yet.
My second point, and this was, it's not really a change of anything, so I'm not going to make a motion, but I had, Ted and I had this conversation in the past as it relates to the terms. And if you all remember, while the voters established the Children's Services Council in November, and the county commission, I think, took applications and then made recommendations, and it was rather quick. Once they submitted those to the governor, that he made his 5 appointments. That doesn't always work that way. And I would suggest, so I asked Ted if he could find out what happens in the event that he doesn't make an appointment. And I think, and I'm looking at Mr. Rowe, like maybe he knows, did a little research, and I want to make sure that that everybody is privy to the information that was provided to me, but specifically Mr. Jones, because of your line of questioning earlier, I think it'll be helpful.
Mr. Rowe, would you address the issue?
Yes, Mr. Chair. In the event that a chair seat. Thank you, Holly. In the event a chair seat term expires without a new appointment having been made, the current resident of that seat would typically hold over to the extent that he or she is willing to do so until the appointment is actually made. If that person cannot or does not wish to continue, they have to formally resign from the position at that time. It's basically a holding over of the person in that seat until the new appointment is made.
And what does that do to your math, Paul?
It does nothing to my math. It was really what it would do to my math is if we didn't have the person, that when your term ended and there wasn't a reappointment or an appointment made, that person would drop off, then the math all changes. This is the easiest answer for math, but it wasn't until Ted explored this question, and I think I was the only one who knew the answer, or I didn't know the answer, or knows what Mr. Rowe's answer is. And I think you're right. I just think
I wonder if that's if a person's term has expired, then the position remains vacant until an appointment is made. If I'm no longer a school board member, until that time that the school district appoints someone else, I don't think that I am qualified to continue to serve. Or if I think the position remains vacant until whomever's job it is to appoint that replacement is made.
That's why that word eligible is real helpful.
And that's what, because I think otherwise you run the risk of persons who are serving who have no legitimate authority.
But except that I will say this, if you look at the Florida statute on appointments, not elected, which is your example of a school board member is a little bit different. But if you look at board appointments, for example, there are board appointments to, I'll throw out an insurance one, Citizens Property Insurance Company. And it specifies in statute that a board member will continue to serve until a new appointment is made, which was the point that Mr. Rowe is making. The statute makes it incredibly clear that that's the way it works. Sometimes, depending on which board it is, it's a little bit silent. And most boards, however, work the way I just described, that if you were appointed by a Speaker of the House, because that's who makes the appointment, you will continue to serve past your term until the Speaker of the House, new Speaker, existing Speaker, makes a new appointment.
Okay.
So, but I think on the Children's Services Council, Mr. Jones, to your point, I don't know that it was as clear as it is on most other boards, but that's why I kind of asked the question.
Yeah, we've already confronted that issue the one time because we had to make a replacement and the school board acted expeditiously. Thank you very much, because we didn't even know there was an issue. That's how little we knew. But we got that seat filled expeditiously. So any other comments or discussions of the bylaws? Yes, Ms. McFadden, you're recognized.
Point of clarification, actually. Under the lobbying, it says in the first sentence that we will not award funding to an organization who hires someone whose principal authority is to lobby the council. Doesn't say that it couldn't be their secondary issue. I think maybe striking the term principal there, plus it's spelled wrong, so that really bothers me. And then the sentence that follows that, I don't necessarily understand, and maybe somebody could help. Subject to the foregoing, an officer, director, official, principal, or bona fide employee of the organization, person, or entity seeking funding may engage in lobbying without payment or compensation. So it sounds like if you pay someone, we're not going to fund you. But if you tell someone to do it on your staff and you don't pay them, that we're going to allow you to lobby. So I'm just a little confused by the second sentence, unless somebody could clarify that, or maybe we just strike it.
I think your interpretation is right, is that if you're an employee of the organization that is seeking funding, the way this is written, I'm not looking at it right now, but I read it, it allows you to do it. If let's say you wanted to hire a me, right,
Southern strategy.
right, little free advertising, if you're looking for a good, no, this would prohibit that, which I support, but it wouldn't prohibit the executive director of an organization who is seeking funding to coming and meeting individually with each one of us to talk about the value of what they have to bring. And I don't know that I consider that lobbying as much as advocating on behalf of your own organization.
Correct.
So I didn't have a problem, but I do think that the sentence is confusing enough that I read it 3 or 4 times to make sure that I thought I understood what it said.
I would just recommend we strike the word principal in the first sentence. And
Me
then
too.
The second sentence, I'm open to whatever. Either striking it, or if people think they understand it, I'm okay with staying in. I'm just confused by it.
Ms. McFadden is right, and I'll tell you why I think she's right. On the issue, I think she's right, but also on the word, because if I have an awful lot of clients, if somebody hired me just to, lobby the Children's Services Council, say I'm not a board member, I would hardly consider that my principal function, not when you look at the rest of my clients. So it would be easy to work around. I think what this council was seeking was a prohibition of paying a lobbyist to come in and lobby the council. And by removing principal, I think you succeed at that.
And also the principal who's your pal
Yeah. As opposed
Sandy
to.
Gallenberg taught me
Look
that
at
rule.
you.
The
Principal
joys
Powell,
of
he's your
copy and
pal.
paste.
All right, so we'll treat that as a motion to strike the word principal. Is there a second?
Second.
And to
Motion
strike the
second.
second sentence.
In the second sentence.
And we're striking the whole second sentence. All right, what page are you on? Tell me.
Page
35.
Thanks.
This is, just to clarify, this is Article 8, prohibition on lobbying, in the first sentence, striking the word principal and striking the whole second sentence. And staff has confirmed with our attorney that it certainly doesn't change the intent of what you've described.
All right, very
And there's
good.
I was just going to confirm, I had McFadden as the primary motion, and Mitch, you seconded?
I did
Just wanna
second.
Make sure I got it correctly.
So motion by McFadden to strike principal in the entire second sentence of the first paragraph of Article 8. Any further discussion, questions? Any objections? Motion carries unanimously, so the resolution is amended. Any other discussion? The proposed resolution is discussed. We still have, is amended. We still have not voted on it yet. Any other discussion? Any other discussion? Seeing no takers, that brings us to Resolution 2022-01, our first resolution of the present year, beginning at page 29. That's not right. That's the bylaws. Beginning at page 39.
Chair Shostrom,
Yeah.
we do need to allow for public comment.
Say again?
We do need to allow for public comment as stated in
Thank
the
you so
agenda.
much. So we are ready to move on to the resolution. Since we're going to take a formal vote to adopt a resolution, it's appropriate for public comment. Any public comment as to Resolution 22-02? Ms. McFadden, do we have any public comment cards?
No, sir, we do not.
Any members of the public who are here, since you didn't know you got to file a card for every single time we have something to take public comment on? Would anyone like to, we'll waive that rule and you can just raise your hand if you want to comment on the resolution. Don't be shy. Going once, going twice. Seeing no takers. So that we'll note for the record, no public comment. And I would ask for a motion to approve resolution 2022-01 as
Go to screen.
amended.
Judge Sostrom, I'd like to move resolution 2022-01 as amended.
Very good. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we're going to let Mr. O'Brien be the second. Quickest reflexes on the council for that time. Any discussions, objections, questions? Seeing no objections, resolution 2022-01 as amended is adopted by the council. Next is the nominations committee. And we had a pretty good discussion of this. This is at page 37 of the package. And this is 2022-02 election of officers. The slate that was proposed at the last meeting by the nominating committee is at section 3A, with the chair as me, Dr. Glenn as the vice chair, and Mr. Mitchell as the treasurer. That is the slate. And that is the resolution 2022-02. And I would ask for a motion.
Public comment.
Public comment. Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
Golly, you think I would figure this out?
There's no public comment at this time on this agenda item.
Any discussion by those who did not submit a comment card? Seeing no takers. Now, is there a motion? Mr. O'Brien?
I'll make the motion to approve the resolution and the slate.
Very good. Resolution slate moved. Is there a second? Mr. Watt. Mr. Watts, so moved and seconded. Any discussion? Questions, concerns, objections? Seeing none, resolution 2022-02 is approved. bringing us to the Needs Assessment Report. Dr. Glenn, you are recognized.
Yes, sir. Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Awesome. All right. I am really excited to share some information about what's been happening with the needs assessment. A lot of things have been going on over the last several months. We do have the wonderful Dr. Sandra Williams here. She is going to be spending a lot of time with us today. And do we have her staff here on Zoom?
We do.
Okay, yeah, so her staff members are also present in the room to answer any additional questions that we have. Before we get to Dr. Williams, there are a couple of updates that I will be providing, but then afterward, I will turn it over to her. We have a lot of information that we're going to cover, and so I do have one major request for all of you. Holly told me that we only have 30 minutes. And we have more than 30 minutes worth of content. I'm just going to say that up front. So I'm going to ask you all to please take notes. And just be thorough in your notes and wait until we get to the end, if possible, to come back and ask questions, because if we stop throughout the process, we're going to be here all night. So I do, I want to give everybody an opportunity to hear everything that's being shared, and then we'll have an opportunity to go back. So that's my specific request to all of you. So let's get started. If you can take me to the next slide, please. So when we all met the last time, we agreed that we will have an additional $10,000 that will be added to the budget of the work that's being done. And the reason for that $10,000 was for the addition of the 3 additional focus groups. We did not amend the contract that we have with QQ for that additional $10,000. They're going to simply give us an invoice for the work that's being done, and then for all of the additional services, which will be like childcare services and the other things, the other supplies that they need for those focus groups. So there was not an amendment for that. However, there was an amendment to the contract, and let me explain to you all what those amendments were for. We needed some additional time to be added to the timeline for the work that's being done. So we amended the contract to push back some of the deliverables further back in the timeline. And I know the first thing that I was asking, why in the world are we pushing the timeline back? And it was simply because of COVID. That's just the answer to that. We had to push back several of the focus groups because when there was the surge with COVID right at the beginning of the year, we pushed back some of the parent focus groups. And then also we made some changes to some of the provider focus groups. So because of that pushback in the timeline, there was a request, which I thought was a reasonable request, that we push back some of the deliverables. But those deliverables were stated clearly in the contract. So we amended the contract to give them that additional time because of the delay in getting those focus groups done. However, the big news, the great news is that even though we push this back, the final due dates, it's not going to be impacted. So they are still committed to the final due dates. It's just going to compress the time that we have as the Needs Assessment Committee to review some of those deliverables that are coming. So I just wanted to let everybody know that the due dates are still in place, but that we do have a compression in the timeline. So I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that. What we also added, if you look at the slide, what we also added to this, to the contract was a new deliverable. There is an interactive dashboard that's going to be given to us 1 month later than it was originally planned to be sent to us. However, we're still going to get the raw data from the information that they get by the original due date. So we're still going to get the information, just not in the dashboard that we had planned to get by the due date. So they will give us the dashboard. It will be 1 month later. However, once again, the final due dates of the deliverables will not be impacted, but the dates have changed a little bit. The second change that you are able to see, and it's really hard for me to see the slide from here, but the second shift was the draft gap analysis. That due date has also been changed. And then also some of the funding option A's will also be postponed by a month by the time they're able to give that to us. So once again, the final due dates are not impacted. We'll still get everything as outlined, but I did want you to know we did give them some additional time because we had to allocate more time at the beginning. I do want to give the Needs Assessment Committee, which is no longer being called the Needs Assessment Committee. I think we have a new name. I don't even know what it is. What is it? The Program Services Committee. That's our new name. But I want to give all of you that served on that committee heads up that because of the compressed timeline, now that pressure falls on us. to review the information that we get from QQ in a timely manner and to come back with recommendations before we have our updated council meetings. So we will have some meetings that will be scheduled prior to the next council meetings that we will have to convene, and we will have to hash through that information to be able to review it, make sure we're comfortable with it, and then come up with recommendations prior to the next board meeting. So just putting everybody on notice that those will be scheduled. So I just wanted to make sure y'all were aware of that. Okay, the other thing, and I know I'm going fast, and it's because we have so much information to cover, but I do want to talk a little bit also about the subcontract. So we can go to the next slide. So on our last meeting, we did ask for the, we asked for Q&Q to provide for us the MOUs of any subcontracts that they have with any service providers that are here in Leon County. And those MOUs are in our packets. I don't know what page they're on. What page are they on, Holly?
45 and 53.
Okay, on page 45 and 53, we have those MOUs inside of our packets. I do want to let everybody know that QQ has subcontracted with two organizations, United Partners for Human Services, and then also We Are All in Need. So they have contracted as you know, these two organizations as subcontractors. Those MOUs are in your packet, so you can have an opportunity to review those. But one thing that I want to stress, that the nature of those MOUs, if you take some time and look through those, the nature of those MOUs is basically marketing and making sure that they are able to logistically organize a lot of those focus groups. So the lion's share of the work that we hired QQ to do, they're still the ones that are doing that, even though we have these subcontractors that are helping them with marketing and getting some specific individuals available to attend. So I wanted everybody to be aware of that. Once again, those MOUs are inside your packets. Please take a look at those and make sure that you're comfortable with those. Okay, next slide. I think all of you have seen this slide before. This was a part of the presentation you all saw in December. But I just wanted to give you all an opportunity to see once again where these focus groups are actually happening, where the parent focus groups are actually happening, and then I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the provider focus groups or the provider conversations that were happening. So, so far, QQ has hosted 2 sessions, and we're really excited to give you all an opportunity to hear about those 2 sessions. I want to give you an overview as to where these have actually happened. The first one was in Lake Jackson area, and then I think there was one last night at NIMS Middle School here on the south side of Tallahassee. There is a focus group that will be housed or hosted tonight, and it will be at the Woodville Branch Public Library. And then on Saturday, there will be 4 separate focus groups all on that same day. And then there's one on Sunday, and then the last 2 will be on Monday. So they're busy and there's a lot going on. So I just wanted to give you all an opportunity as to what's going on with those. Sandra, when Dr. Williams, when I give you an opportunity to share information, if you want to just provide a quick, a quick statement as to how those are going, any major insights, you might share those. But I just want to let everybody know we will be getting a full report of the information that they capture from those. So, we've had 2 so far, but everything that they capture will be shared with us, and we'll be able to get some really good insights as to what information they're getting from these the parent focus groups. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the blue triangles. If you look at the chart, so the blue triangles are the locations for the provider forums. Now, that's where we intended to have the provider forums. But once again, because of COVID, the decision was made not to have these provider forums in person. So they have been broken down into smaller sessions. These sessions are happening via Zoom, virtually. And so, because of that, we have had an opportunity to have more of these. So we've had multiple provider forums as opposed to the much larger in-person ones. So the dates, the first round of the provider forums, those happened already on January 5th, 6th, and 10th. And then the next round of the provider forums will be next week. So just wanted to make sure everybody's aware of that on January 26th and 27th. So those are the provider forums that, the schedule for those provider forums. And, one thing I really want to comment on, when you look at this map, I think they've done a really good job of dispersing these forums equally across the county. We just want to make sure that every community is represented and everybody's voice is a part of that. So, there was a lot of energy that went into picking appropriate locations for these forums, just to make sure that everybody within the community is heard equally. So I just wanted to point that out. The next slide, I just love this slide. This is a slide, this is a logo of all of the service providers or the providers that have already participated in those provider forums. That's just the first 3. So there are 3 more that are being scheduled next week. So can you imagine what this site's going to look like by the time those conversations happen with those additional service providers? Just to give you some insight as to how busy they've been, over the 3 days that they've already had these provider forums, they've had 9 Zoom meetings and 14 hours of facilitation and conversation with these providers. So they're really spending time and really digging deep and trying to get some insights as to what's, what services these providers are providing and how they impact our community. To date, there have been 65 unique providers that we have engaged with as a part of this body of work. So looking forward to the next one, where you get to see even more organizations that'll be a part. And then the more organizations, the more insight, the more data that we'll actually be able to get. Now, there are other opportunities to engage. So we have been having these, the parent focus groups. There will also be 2 of the focus groups for the children that will actually be involved. We've been having these provider forums, but there are other opportunities and other ways for people to engage, to be a part of these conversations. The first one, there is a community survey, and I think, is Neil in the room? There he is, yeah. Neil's already done the survey, and I was just really excited that, he came over and talked a little bit about his experience with this. This survey is live and it's available on our website right now, and we're encouraging members of the community that can't come to any of these forums to actually take the survey. So this is an opportunity for them to share with us their feedback. And I think it'll be a really good idea for us as council members to go through and just experience what we are asking others to do, but look at the survey and just get a feel for it. So I ask everybody to do that. There's also another opportunity for people to engage with us, and these are the community forums. These are the forums that Paul was really interested in participating in. We've been calling these traveling listen sessions, where there are opportunities for council members to engage with members of the community. We do expect for these to be a lot more informal than in a, I call this a stuffy environment, but we want them to be a lot more informal conversations to give them an opportunity to talk to us as council members. We don't have a schedule for these yet, Paul. But the intent is that during our next meeting, that schedule will be made available to us so that we as council members could look and figure out what we want to do. And then I did like your request for those to be added to our calendars, but that schedule will be available next month so that everybody will have an opportunity to see what's going on when. And I would love for the council members to be a part of those. Okay. That was my introduction. That's like my pastor who, talks for 30 minutes and then says, okay, let's get started with the sermon. All right. So this slide is why we're here today. And this is what I really want to give you all an opportunity to talk about. Everybody has a copy of this. And thank you so much for enlarging it, because I was struggling to make sure I really saw it. I just want to explain to you what this is all about. This is our theory of change and how we plan to be accountable for the work that's being done from this council. So most of this you all have already seen and we've already approved. And there's some new content on here, but I just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. What I really like is at the top where we show our Children's Services Council, our little logo. At the top, what they did was they put around it the 5 values that we really discussed during our November session that Dr. Williams led. And the values there are inclusive, data-driven, equitable, collaborative, and innovative. And those are our values. We want to make sure we stick to those. So I thought it was very important that those were there in the forefront of everything that we do. Those values then lead across the top to our 3 priority areas. Those are the priority areas that this council adopted, which are success in school life, healthy children, youth and families, and then stable and nurturing families and communities. So those are our priority areas. And under each of those priority areas are the goal statements that we have for all of those. And you all have seen these, we've already approved these, but I thought it was really good. I like how they put this together. It's in one place. We know what our values are, we have our priorities, and we have our goal statements. But what you haven't seen yet, and this is what QQ has been working on, are these last, down at the bottom, these last 3 buckets. And these buckets really talk about our measures. This is how we're going to assess the impact of the work that we're going to be doing. So we really want to look at these community benchmarks, and we want to, it's my goal that at the end of Dr. Williams' presentation today, that we adopt these community goals. And so what I'm asking her to do is to discuss with us the methodology, like how did you all come up with these goals? And what are the data elements that were chosen, what was not chosen and why, but just kind of walk us through that process so that the council is comfortable that these benchmarks here are, they're evidence-based, we want to be transparent with them, but I want everybody to make sure that we're comfortable with the process and then comfortable with the benchmarks that were chosen. And spoiler alert, after she presents at the end, I'm going to ask the council if we could please come to a consensus to adopt these. And the resolution will accept the fact that we do understand that things may change. As new research comes along, as new things come, we want to be able to make some changes to them. So they won't be set in stone, but I want you to get a sense of the direction of where these going and working to adopt those. So with that, I think that's my final content. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Williams. I'm going to ask her to please come up and share with us the methodology and how we ended up with these benchmarks and how can we use them moving forward.
Dr. Williams, before you speak, and I know you said hold your questions to the end, but you're asking me to listen to something that I'm going to then vote on.
Yes.
I want to make sure I understand what it is that you're asking us to vote on, Dr.
So she is going to explain to us what the benchmarks will be for each of the priority areas and what the methodology was for getting to those benchmarks. So I want you to look, she's going to explain the process. I want you to look at the benchmarks and make sure you feel as if those will help us measure the impact of the work that we're going to be doing over the course of this.
Got it. Thank you. I know I will hold all other questions.
Okay, no.
Dr. Williams, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. So you guys see the theory of change here on the screen. And what you can see are the benchmarks that represents the indicators that will monitor the access of the impact that CSC is hoping to make. So these benchmarks will allow you as a council to hold yourselves accountable. And as you mentioned, thank you, Dr. Glenn, it'll also allow for transparency so that members of the community can see in what areas are we making an impact? What areas are we headed towards the right direction in order to make a change that we want to see? So if we could switch to the next slide, perfect. So on this slide, the benchmarks I'm referring to are here in green, and they're also captured on the theory of change. And just a couple of things I'd like you to note as it relates to the benchmarks. So the key benchmark indicators were defined as targets that programs may aim to impact in the longer term. So for example, a program itself may aim to improve academic success in the short term with the expectation of improving graduation rates in the longer term. So in this case, measures of academic achievement may be most relevant to evaluation efforts, but the county, you guys might be interested in tracking graduation rates to determine whether or not the key target benchmarks are being met. So the relationship between the program outcomes and the benchmark indicators is also aligned with the theory of change that you guys have in front of you. Next slide. So to select appropriate benchmarks, the research team considered 3 criteria. First, benchmarks should be publicly available such that they can be readily tracked over time, which is separate from efforts to evaluate like specific programs. Second, the benchmark should be measures that are anticipated to move over time as a function of successful program implementation in one or more of the associated subdomains. And finally, they should be indicators of positive youth development that point to successful longer-term outcomes. I also want to point out that these benchmark indicators are in alignment with what other statewide entities are using to measure community impact. Similar to like the Florida Chamber scorecard, these indicators are in alignment. Next slide. So the theory of change have many benchmarks, but it doesn't include all. The key outcomes and measures tool, which we developed, is a comprehensive tool that includes the domains of interest, the priority areas and subdomains that you all approved. And I just want to acknowledge the work of the QQ team, specifically Dr. Spencer Dudley, who led the comprehensive KOM2 development, and Amanda, who led the work of the theory of change. Next slide. Okay, so it also includes additional subdomains and associated measures related to these subdomains. So remember, one of the goals of the KOM2 is to provide a comprehensive guide to reliable and valid measures of interest. So I'm gonna quickly walk you through sort of the methodology that we use to develop the KOM. So we started with the 3 domains, the priority areas that the council approved: success in school and life, healthy children, youth and families, and stable and nurturing families and communities. As a next step, the team identified benchmark indicators associated with each domain. So for example, if you want to increase school performance, reduce juvenile crime among school-aged children and youth, what are some benchmarks we can monitor to let us know if we're making an impact or if we're even headed in the right direction? So we could potentially look at 3rd grade reading proficiency. We could potentially look at youth contact with the juvenile justice system. Perhaps we can look at juvenile recidivism rates, just to name a few. So we then identified subdomains associated with the changes we want to see in the benchmarks. So for example, what are some subdomains associated with school age supports to increase school performance? Well, the research literature indicates that if you target school and academic engagement, if you target school behavior, these variables can potentially mediate intervention effects on school performance and interaction with the juvenile justice system. So once the framework was in place for the KOM, we then conducted a comprehensive literature review to identify outcomes and measures pertinent to the subdomains. So as the process sort of unfolded, we were able to locate additional subdomains to incorporate into the KOM tool. We then shared the draft of the KOM with our content subject matter experts, who also assisted us in identifying additional subdomains. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about our restriction criteria as it relates to the measures that are in the KOM. So first, we did not include measures that were designed or normed for a narrow population. So the measures that are included in the KOM are intended for broad use and have been normed on diverse samples. Second, we included only measures with demonstrated evidence of reliability and validity. In the case of reliability, we included measures that have been shown to have strong internal consistency for our stats folks out there, Cronbach alphas greater than 0.7. In the case of validity, we included measures that are grounded in well-researched theoretical understanding of youth development and developed by area experts, while giving preference to tools that have been shown to correlate with other measures or validated with approaches such as factor analysis, again, for our stats keys. So once the team felt that the tool included a comprehensive set of measures addressing all the domains and subdomains, we again shared it with our subject matter experts for feedback. And now, since one of the goals of the tool is to provide a useful tool for even CSC partners, the research team also conducted a series of focus groups with service providers to further inform the KOM. And we kind of spoke about some of those earlier. Next slide. So the focus groups were designed to gather perspectives on the sort of measures that the partners are currently using and plan to use in the future. Also gather perspectives on information that we felt would be most useful to them to have in the KOM tool. It also allowed us to gauge their capacity building needs as it relates to measurement and evaluation. So we didn't want to propose reliable, valid measures that providers are saying, wait, we don't even have the capacity to collect this data. Next slide. So included in the tool are outcomes and measures that fall into a few different categories. We have outcome measures, screeners, risk and protective factors. So first are the outcome measures, which are tools that can be incorporated into program evaluation work to assess the effect of the program on its participants. So for example, a program that aims to develop social emotional skills in children, you may want to include an assessment of social emotional skills to explore whether or not the program had its intended impact on participating children. So screeners, as many of you know, represent another data source of interest to program development and evaluation. And screeners are brief assessments that are intended to flag youth or children who are at risk of negative outcomes. So screeners are usually used to help select program participants, monitor program process, but in some cases, you can see them as an outcome. So also included are measures that are regarded as risk and protective factors. And these are characteristics that have been associated with either higher or lower likelihood of negative outcomes in a given domain. So same as with the screeners, the risk and protective factors may be used to develop programs, identify participants, determine which youth are at greatest risk for example, substance abuse, so that they can have targeted preventative services. Same idea, the risk and protective factors can serve as outcomes. So in an effort to ensure that the KOM was comprehensive, we not only included the measures, we indicated whether they were outcomes, screeners, risk and protective factors. We also included the citations for these measures as well as the costs. So we're still in the midst of doing the work. We have some preliminary findings. I'm always nervous to talk about the preliminary findings because there's so much analysis that goes into the qualitative analysis. But what we have learned so far is from the conversations with some of the potential providers is that there may be a need for capacity building as it relates to data. And so we did ask questions like, what would be your capacity to be able to collect some of this outcome data? So we were able to get some of that feedback. We also heard, which I was really excited about from providers, an interest in wanting to coordinate their efforts, specifically for those providers that are working in very similar areas. So there was an interest in trying to find ways to work together towards a common goal. So that sort of gives you an idea of how can CSC potentially facilitate that space. We were also able to hear about the needs of children, youth, and families from the provider's perspective. The focus group with the parents, we were able to sort of hear from their personal experiences some of the needs that they mentioned. Yesterday was a very strong focus group where parents had a chance to share the needs of their children, but they also shared their own mental health needs so that they can better provide for their children. So that came up in some of the conversation. So I just want to remind you all that all this work builds upon the next. So the engagement with the providers informs the KOM. The engagement with the parents, the youth, the providers, again, around needs is going to inform the gap analysis report. And all of this work is going to inform sort of the work that you all are doing as you're thinking about, what outcomes should we include in a potential RFP? How can we make sure that the providers have the capacity to be able to collect some of the outcome data that you guys decide to include? And of course, everything impacts the actual needs assessment when identifying gaps. So as Dr. Glenn mentioned, we're in the middle of doing all of the focus groups. She also shared that some of them have been postponed, but we're back on track. We have one tonight down in Woodville. And the next key deliverable will be the comprehensive program inventory, the draft, and the informative program inventory, which is due around February 8th. And I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. So what I'm going to ask you to do, if you don't mind, and I'm going off script for a quick second. Holly, if you can go to the next few slides. Dr. Williams, I'm going to ask you to just briefly provide a brief overview. I don't expect you to read every one of these, but what are some of the major key measures for each of the 3 priority areas? Just give some.
Sure. And so right here, you can see, I sort of can see, this is under school success in school and life. And so what we did was we tried to really identify those key benchmark indicators that have been shown in the literature to be connected with school success. And so some of those you'll see: kindergarten readiness, grade promotion, 3rd grade reading proficiency, 8th grade math. It's a lot of data, but we wanted to make sure that you guys had options in terms of thinking about how are you going to, check to see if you're making a move in the needle and in the community. We have educational attainment, juvenile crime rate. So it's quite extensive. And the good thing is that, as you mentioned earlier, it allows you to say, you know what, maybe in another year, there might be another data point that's available that you want to add in order to look at the impact that you're making in the community. So this is under success. Okay, now we're at healthy children, youth, and families. I do want to remind you all that this was also informed by some of the conversations we had with providers. So we did ask, how are you measuring impact? What are ways that you feel we can, look to see if we're making a difference? So we have infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rate, birth weight. We heard some conversation around dental care, access to dental care. Other things that might have come up, suicide rate came up not only with the providers, but also came up with during the parent focus groups as well. And the last one we're looking at here is stable and nurturing families and communities. Some of these you can see, I'm sorry, I'm like, I can hardly see.
This is also in the packet starting on page 61, if you want an easier way to look at it.
Perfect. So what you do see here, if you look at the theory of change, there are subdomains. And so we wanted to make sure that there were benchmarks that were associated with those subdomains. So for example, we have youth development, food stability, and family and children. So we wanted to make sure, do we have a benchmark related to food stability? Do we have a benchmark related to housing stability? So there, the goal was to make sure that there was alignment with the theory of change.
Thank you so very much. And I just, what I'm going to repeat back to you was an abbreviated understanding of your methodology. And thank you once again for reviewing those key measures. But it sounds like your team started with a comprehensive literature review under each of the priority areas to really start the process of identifying these key outcomes and measures. You identified different key domains and subdomains. Once you identified those, you went to the subject matter experts. You had them vetted and give you guidance as to where those are. You had focus groups with the service providers. You consulted them. You got their insights as to their ability to track these different measures and what those costs would be. And then after that, you all came up with this list, and you had your citations and all of the information to finalize this list. And I know that was a quick, like a 2 seconds review of what it took you all several weeks to do, but did that summarize your methodology for identifying these key measures?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Awesome, thank you. All right, so we're at the end, and we do have questions. I'm going to open it up for questions. We'll start with you. Yes,
Really,
please.
2 questions. One relates to information. This will serve as a great baseline for us as a community as we look forward, look ahead. In order to do that successfully, we have to remeasure these routinely. Do you have some sense of what frequency we would need to relook at these measures? So that's one. And second is, I don't know about outside of healthcare, but I know in healthcare, Florida is fortunate to be a data-rich state that collect a lot of information. I don't know how much of this information outside of healthcare, or even within the healthcare domain, is already available for us to draw down, for us to, evaluate on a weekly basis. So those are my two questions.
Sure.
Frequency and that data availability already exists.
Absolutely. When you guys get the gap analysis report, what you'll find is that we'll include sort of what we're referring to as baseline data. So we'll tell you what is the state of the county at this time. And so for data that's currently available, we know that the 2020 census was just done. I'm hoping that we'll be able to access that data and include that in the report. But what we've seen in some other communities, they will look at this on a yearly basis. After 2 years, they may consider doing again another needs assessment to sort of get the pulse of the community. But I would say about each year. Now, you mentioned about the health data. Again, one of our main goal was, can we find data that's consistently available? Not for just this year, but we know that there's going to be continuity in accessing that data. So that was one thing we made sure we did as it relates really not just to health, but to all of them.
Well, Florida has actually some excellent, they've been measuring health data points for
Amen.
decades and have a pretty comprehensive
We measure.
set that is.
Where you can
already
use those
available. So I don't know if you've looked at that. And I don't know outside of health.
Yeah.
What else is the
I
state
think
of
she
Florida is measuring? She said really don't engage in that as much, but there's some things there and it is consistent year in, year out.
Already collected.
So.
And one of our goal again was to look at, is it available at the state and is it available at the county, so that there can be some comparisons that can be made.
Judge Sargent, you want to clarify?
Yeah,
Availability.
the data that we're going to get from providers is not going to be the outcome data, right? We're not going to get infant mortality rate from the providers. We're going to get infant mortality rate from state reported or county reported sources.
I'm so happy you mentioned that. So no, absolutely. So that you have the program level data. So I talked a little bit about the subdomains, right? Let's say a provider is working on school engagement. They may have data, outcome data that you guys are saying, in order for us to know whether or not your program is demonstrating the impact that we want it to see, here are some outcomes. That's separate and different from the benchmark, which are more longer term and take more time for us to see that change.
Sure. And then can I ask a question?
Please.
So a fear that's been expressed by us, and I mean, truthfully, an expectation that's been expressed by us, is that need outstrips resources. That you're likely, your assessment is likely to identify greater need than the resources that we collect, as much as we're grateful to the community for the confidence they've given us. We're going to have to make some hard calls. And can you talk a little bit about whether this is going to help us make those, the work that you're doing is going to help us make those calls, set those priorities? We might have to reduce our focus, narrow our focus. And is that something that is going to be identified by the needs assessment?
Yes, so the gap analysis will tell you where the gaps are the funding option A and option B is sort of where we're saying, based on the data, based on what we're hearing from parents, based on what we're hearing from youth, based on what we're hearing from providers. Again, I'm going to repeat, based on the quantitative data. I'm a quantitative researcher. So based on that data, where do we see the greatest needs? And so you're absolutely right. Unfortunately, with just this funding, you won't be able to solve all the problems. Another way to think about this as well is, as you're doing this work, are there other funders within the county? We talked about how the providers can sort of work together towards a common goal. Are there other funders within the county that can sort of partner with CSC, and because you guys can't do it alone. And that's the thought. So how can you still think about those goals from a funder's perspective to collaborate so that you can try to meet all the needs, but you can't, not as just one CSC.
Fair enough. Because as I'm looking at the data measures, they're all familiar to most of us, I think. Boy, they're hard to prioritize, and I look forward to your analysis very much, because we're going to have to make some hard calls.
Tough job, yeah.
So I have a question to make. State also does a an outstanding job of measuring academic outcomes for students. So a lot of these areas we would have a lot of information on. For most of these areas, we'd have information on and could measure outcomes and results. But how many focus groups did you say you had to date? And can you tell us a little bit about the engagement level with providers and the engagement participation level with parents or any other groups you've already held? Has it been successful, or has it been often see 5 disgruntled parents?
Well, I have to say, we've only done 2 for the parents. We're going to be doing some more in the upcoming days. I want to really think about the enriched quality data that we're getting within those groups. Oftentimes when we're meeting with the parents, you're talking 8 to 10. 8 to 10 is not the entire county, even if you conduct 10 or 20. But one of the things I try to open up with is to let them know you're representing many other parents who are not here. So think about, not just the needs of your own child and family, what are the needs of some of the other folks, your colleagues that you've heard? And so the thought is, if we can have diversity in terms of where we're conducting these focus groups, we can hear from parents from different socioeconomic levels, because they all have different needs. And that's really the goal that we're aiming for.
So does that mean there's been 5 parents or 6 parents but they're representing?
No. So what I should say is, for the focus group, because it's more intimate conversations, we want to keep it around 8.
Okay.
We don't want to have,
30.
2. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So it's intended to be a more intimate conversation, smaller group, so that folks can feel comfortable.
Yeah.
So I would say on average, it's been between 6 to 8.
Yeah,
But it's
8 people telling you how worthless the school superintendent is probably better than 38.
I'll be happy to say no one has said that.
No, but and I do have another with
Why are you lying?
with providers. Providers, have you had good feedback from a number of providers? I would assume so, because there are probably a number of providers that also want to be partners. So I would assume the provider feedback is probably very rich.
And just to, so there are 2 types of focus groups that we did with providers. One was focused on the KOM, which is really around what measures are you collecting? How are you determining the impact of your services? And then the other was really around their perception of the needs of the families and children they serve. And so a lot of great, useful information around those needs, thoughts around where they feel the gap is. That's the hope, was that we can hear not just the provider's perspective, but we'll have triangulation of data by also speaking with the parents. And then we get to speak with the youth, which is going to be really exciting.
So remind us again how we source the parents. How do we identify which parents participate in these focus groups?
Sure. It was great that we had 2 of the local providers here. I think you guys might have shared.
UPHS and We Are All, United Partners for Human Services, and We Are All We Need.
And the reason we wanted to go with that is because no one wants to come talk to a researcher, so they might not be as excited getting a call from myself. But the thought is, if we use local partners to sort of do that outreach for us, then the word can get out and folks will feel a little bit more comfortable coming forth.
I have a question.
Mr. Jones, you're recognized.
I'm curious to know, when you have your parent focus groups that you describe are small, intimate groups of from 6 to 8 people, and you having done this for other communities besides ours, do members of the council ordinarily participate in those focus groups or attend those focus groups?
They do not. And really, again, the reason I want to share that is I begin the focus group by saying a couple of things. One, we talk a lot about confidentiality. We talk about it's a safe place where you can feel comfortable sharing some of the struggles that you're experiencing, sharing some of the things that are working. And so we really want it to be an environment where parents are all together just sharing their experiences with their children and families. So typically it's not. Now, I know that there are going to be some community conversations. I think that's probably the most appropriate place,
Right.
to be able to still, have some interaction with some of the community members.
The reason I asked, because I've heard this mentioned earlier in our conversations about our being aware of participating or attending focus groups. And I know as a person who, for example, if you're in my district, going to focus groups at my school, I can imagine that the conversation wouldn't be entirely forthright if I were present. Or it might be a distraction if I were present. So, and that's not my intent, because I know you want to get quality data and quality interaction and quality feedback. And so I think that perhaps there might be some greater guidance for us in terms of what is our participation. And particularly when I think of Commissioner Cummings, the superintendent, and myself, and then even for those who may be more recognizable, particularly when you're engaging with parents.
If I might, Councilmember Jones, this is really where those community conversations with the council comes in, because it will be publicly noticed. You can be, as many council members can be there or as few. And you really have the opportunity to have those continuous conversations with the public. And I would imagine they will start off a little guarded, but as we continue to have those, this community tends to be a very vocal community, and they will open up even more and have even more conversation. And remember, we're going to start those in March, so they will be a part of informing where we end up.
Well, I appreciate our clarifying that now, because that had not been clarified in our comments up until now.
And Mr. Mitchell brought that up, and I think it's
last
really,
meeting.
yeah, I think it's really important that we do that, that we're not just some group that meets at TCC and is not really out there with the people and listening, actively listening and intently listening. So I think it's a wonderful idea where she can do her thing, and then, but we can also get out there and do our thing in the community to get, to get buy-in, even from some of the naysayers that are still there.
Dr. Glenn, I return the podium to you. I
No worries.
apologize.
Ms. McFadden, please, you have a comment, a question?
Yeah, you're going to ask us to pass today this list that's here.
Yes.
So I have some questions then. Under the success in school and life, and I guess the superintendent can help me with this. I don't know why, but grade promotion, retention, and early grades in there twice. So I think they thought it was really important. And I'm not, Mississippi just moved up from state 50 in reading to like number 4 or something, like incredible difference, because they held back their third graders who couldn't read. So retention is not necessarily a bad thing. It can really move the needle. And I'm wondering when we, grade promotion / retention in early grades can be positive. And I just don't know, because it's not clear to me why, what the outcome is or what the intent is. I know the campaign for grade level reading, they thought retention was a negative thing, and yet it was passed in 2004 initially in Florida. It had tremendous impact and growth in our students since that initial passing. So I'm just wondering, some of these things I don't know. For example, education attainment is so broad that I'm not sure what it is. School attendance, absent 21 days is a huge indicator of dropout. Chronic tardiness in early grades is a much better indicator typically. So I guess they're so broad here. And I'm just wondering if there's more detail behind this that we could look at to really understand, when it says educational attainment, I don't know what I'm voting on there, because that's so broad.
So I want to point out that in the KOM, there's a lot more detail around each of these benchmarks. So let me say that first. The second thing I wanted to point out is that the benchmarks are not meant to be analyzed or reviewed in isolation of the others. And so if you're thinking about how can we monitor whether we're making a difference as it relates to school success, here are all the benchmarks that we can look at, not just one, not just looking at grade promotion. And I do want to also add that grade promotion was also something that came up in the conversation with some of the providers, not necessarily for a bad or good thing. In one of the focus groups we had yesterday, a parent also mentioned that, my son, I think, is going to benefit from being held back and retained. However, there's a whole negative connotation around being held back. So how do we deal with that? So I don't want you to think of it as just, we're looking at one, but we're trying to provide a breadth of benchmarks that you guys can continue to and sort of keep your eye on to see how progress is being made.
Does that answer your question?
You may have a different list than I'm looking at, Liza. What do you?
I'm looking
Go to
at
page
page
61.
61.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm looking at the chart. Sorry.
All right. Rocky, did you have the same?
Well, yeah, I mean, this doesn't necessarily align. This list doesn't necessarily align.
It was edited down
Yeah,
to fit
I
on
mean,
the
there's
slide.
some edits and some
Sure.
Yeah.
some changes. Philosophically, just to this issue, we try our best not to retain students in early grades. I mean, we do from time to time in third grade, there's a statute that says if they don't have reading, if they're level one, score level one on the FSA in third grade, that they're retained. But we usually put those kids even in a summer program, and Carmen can speak to what she does, not to retain the kids, because if they're retained once or twice, by the time you have a 15-year-old, 16-year-old, seventh grader, and we even have now a program for overage fifth graders. We have 13-year-old fifth graders, 12 and 13-year-old fifth graders. So the more you retain them, I know it's a high school, if we had a 17-year-old ninth grader, the chances were that kid was not going to graduate from high school. That's just one of these, they picked third grade reading, eighth grade math. I didn't develop this list. So, but a number of these things are indicators of students' academic success.
Okay. Let's come to Mr. Well, let me just check in with you. Are you comfortable with that response? Do you
I
mind?
am. I feel that there's some of these are so generic, like educational attainment. And I know you're saying there's more to it, but I don't know what that means.
Yeah, and I think once you have a chance to, well, let me just say this. Being general, I think, is also a part of the intent, right? And so when we're thinking about youth development, we thought about what are those things that lets us know that a youth is successfully transitioning into adulthood. And it is educational attainment, whether it's post-secondary, whether they're getting a technical degree, or whether they're getting employment. So educational attainment was included because the literature indicates that as it relates to youth transitioning into adulthood, if we can have them attain some type of educational certificate or a degree, that their outcomes will still be stronger, more positive.
Okay, thank you. I'm just going to assume I'll get more information.
And actually, Sandra, if you'll let me jump in. So Holly has actually pulled up the entire document, so you can see those subdomains and then the different data points that go with that. We can absolutely, it's a public document. We can share that with the council so that you can look at that, and I think it will make more sense when you look at all of it together. It was just going to be huge. There was no way we could print it and put it in the packet for you to review.
And we did talk about that. And honestly, I was terrified to have you all see, because I just knew that was going to be the entire meeting, going through every single one of these items. But there is a lot of data or subdomains under each one of these to really define a lot of these more clearly. But let's go to Paul. Your question.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Glenn. Before I have my questions, I do want to get a piggyback on some of the other comments. The old adage of the devil's in the details. Devil's in the details of specifically what Ms. McFadden was referencing and the superintendent in terms of sort of the education side of it. The devil's in the details as to one of the points of under the Healthy Children, Youth and Families subsection was dental health. Dental health, that's a fairly broad. Are you talking about is dental health one visit to the dentist a year, 2 visits a year, once every 3 years, extractions, what does that mean? So the devil's in the details in terms of the specifics. I'm okay voting on sort of a concept, but without reading a document ahead of time, I'm really not comfortable on voting on specifics. And I think that's kind of what Ms. McFadden and Mr. Hannah and Mr. O'Brien were referring to. The second point in terms of the devil's in the details, and I get the fact that not one of these is going to be used exclusively, that you're taking a whole bunch of ingredients and you're putting it into a pot and kind of stirring it up. But before those ingredients get stirred up, and we're asked to be held accountable by the community to spend 10 million of their dollars, roughly $9.5 million a year, before those ingredients get stirred up, I want to feel real comfortable that I know what those ingredients are and what they mean, and why we added 3 tablespoons of salt when maybe just 1 tablespoon was all that was necessary. Worried about heart issues. Yes, sir. Yes. The one of the ingredients that's being added to this, and this was my point at the last meeting, of who is selecting the parents. How are the parents getting selected? And it isn't just important to me that they're representative of the county on a socioeconomic standpoint, but a needs standpoint. You can have, I think of substance abuse, which was mentioned earlier. Are any of the families that were selected, are any of them experiencing that? And by the way, I'm a selfish parent, but that is by nature, parents are selfish. They think about their children. And while you may encourage them to think about their neighbors and their other needs, we as human beings, but definitely as parents, can only think of the needs of our individual kids. And I worry that the selection of these parents, and I've, just so you know, I have heard from those that have been reached out to, a focus group coming from an old political hack. There's a science to it. When you select 10 people or 12 people to go into a room, if you want to find out how's your candidate doing, you can find out real quickly if you select the right 10 or 12 people. So the devil is in the details. And when it comes to who's in that room, and I appreciate it, Mr. Jones made the comment of keeping us out of that room. And I accepted that at the last board meeting, like, okay, I get it, check. I'll go to the community conversation because we're spending other people's money. I want to hear what they want, what they have to say. But I am nervous about the ingredients that they're going in. And once we stir it up, I won't be able to distinguish one from the other. And then the final point I'll make is to Judge Sostrom's point. We're going to have some really hard decisions to make. And once they're all sort of intermingled in your pot of chili, I'd like to know how much cumin is in there. And that will help me make those hard decisions.
You want to replace the salt with cumin?
That's
according to my cardiologist.
That's a little extra flavor. So that I appreciate the ability to comment. Now just real quickly, the provider forums and those that were in attendance. So I looked at the logos, and I recognize a lot of those logos. And those are impressive organizations, and I think it's amazing that you guys 14 hours. It's a lot of time. All of those logos that I recognized, I think have they've gone down this path before, and they have the wherewithal to, if you tell them this is the data we'd like you to collect, they understand that and are able to collect it for you. Have we talked to any of the, I want to choose my words correctly because I don't want to exclude any of the less sophisticated, and I mean sophisticated in terms of experience. So that's a better word. Less experienced providers of services, less experienced in terms of providing services through a government contract, to determine whether or not they have the ability to collect the data. Again, I don't want to exclude from folks who come forward to offer services. So
So I want to go back to your first comment.
Okay.
One thing I wanted to make sure that I make clear is the type of data that we're using to do this work. So when we're looking at needs assessment, we're looking at quantitative data. And what does that mean? We're talking about secondary publicly available data. So that's one, looking at where the county stands as it relates to publicly available data. We're also looking at, as you guys saw, we're getting community surveys that are from just folks who we were, again, another pitch, if you haven't completed the survey, to do that. So we're getting perceptions from folks as it relates to the needs, and that's at the provider level and as well as, just community residents. So when we talk about qualitative data, that sort of helps us to tell the story behind the quantitative data that we're going to share. And so I'm trying to help you to sort of picture what this report would look like.
Okay.
It'll begin by telling you the state of the county as it relates to education, health, housing, economic stability, food stability. So it sort of sets the stage of what does it look like with available data.
Good.
We're triangulating that data along with, okay, now we've spoken to the community. We wanted to hear from their perspective. And when we're looking at that data, we're looking at it across the different zip codes. And so as we're getting these surveys in, we're sending a report saying, okay, we're getting participation from these zip codes. The demographic breakdown of the data that we're receiving is reflective and in alignment with the breakdown of Tallahassee. And then that qualitative piece, again, is telling us the story. So we see these numbers. What does this mean? What are folks saying? I do want to, make clear that when we met with the providers, we did talk about how can we reach parents who may not have been receiving services? How can we reach parents that have been receiving services? So I believe there was a strong effort to make sure that there's diversity and participation. And so when you saw that slide with just where the parent focus groups are, that was strategic. And the goal was to make sure that we are touching parents in different areas of the county. Talking to the parents I spoke to yesterday, some of them say, no one comes out on this side. So that was great to hear that we're reaching a community perhaps that may not have as much engagement with folks. So I want to make sure that it's clear that the selection of locations was strategic. We wanted to make sure that we had diversity in responses to some of the questions that we're asking. And there's still more to come. So I'm happy to say that we still have many more focus groups happening this weekend. And I appreciate that moment because it's not about, again, we want to keep them intimate 8 to 10. It's because we want to hear the stories, and we want to hear the stories from folks from different backgrounds, from folks from different, not just SES, but we're talking about educational level. We're talking about race and ethnicity. That's when you really know that, you're able to have diversity in thought around the needs.
So my question again, though, is, that was great. I feel much better after hearing you say all that. As it relates to the vendors, are we talking to, as part of their focus group, which I know is not 8 to 10, but much larger, and that's perfectly okay with me. Are we asking the ones that have less experience working directly for a governmental entity, whether or not they have the ability to collect data and whether or not I'm, with all due respect to you, you're a very smart woman. You have said things today that this college educated guy doesn't understand. I'm dying to learn from you. So I'm wondering if you're talking to a vendor community that has less experience, that's more like me, that is more of a lay person. Have you talked to
Yes.
those types? Okay.
So if you remember, one of the lessons learned that I had shared was we gathered from hearing from the providers that there may be a capacity issue as it relates to collecting outcome data.
Right.
this is not uncommon in other communities where providers, they do what they do well, which is interacting and working with parents. Now, this whole conversation around collecting data, outcomes, indicators, that can be, complicated for some smaller organizations. So we wanted to make sure we asked that capacity building question. And we asked them, okay, so if there was capacity building to help you to gain that data, what would that look like? And some of them said, I don't even have a staff member
Right.
to collect the data. So absolutely, that did come up. And that was one of the questions that we asked when we did the community forums.
Okay, so, and I promise I'll be quick, and this kind of piggyback, Dr. Williams, on a comment that you made, and that was the community survey. I think it's fantastic that Mr. Skeen has taken the survey. I didn't know that it was available to take yet, and so I'm anxious to go on. I'm curious, what are we doing? And Ms. Green, this might be a better question for you. What are we doing as a council to let the community know we all represent a good, broad portion of the community, not probably enough, but if you look at us, and we all kind of live in different zip codes around the town, we can all post it on our Facebook, encourage our friends to do it. But what are we doing as a council to alert the community that such a survey exists, and and again, we want the results to be, more than just Mr. Skeen.
We don't think Mr. Skeen speaks for the entire.
Well, he speaks for me a little bit.
That was a joke.
I'm
Clearly,
kidding.
that didn't work.
Walter, you moved away. You get to do the survey.
So first of all, with the community influencers that we have identified to help us identify these parents in these areas in the county, part of what they are doing is helping to ensure that parents and families and anybody in their areas of the community are filling out these surveys. And that's through social media, texting, whatever their method of communication is. Secondly, we do have a pop-up on our website, and it comes up several times, reminding people that when they visit the website, take the community survey. In all of the communications that you will receive, and I believe maybe in some of the communications you did receive, there should be a link there to the community survey that you can share via email, via text, via your social media, all of that. So those are ways that we are getting the word out about the community survey and for people to get those completed.
Okay, I'm going to move forward. I know I need to go to Terrence. I do want to make one comment, though. I want everybody to know what we have tasked QQ to do is to look at our priority areas and identify benchmark measures that really give an indication of success within a community on these particular areas. And that's what they did. They went and they found these are measures that, these are things that are measures that should, give you some insight as to what's actually happening in the community around these particular standards. Once the gap analysis is done, so we're not saying we're going to go do something on each one of these things right now. They're going to go back and they're going to do a gap analysis, and they're going to say, here are where the greatest needs are. Here's where Leon County is doing really great and Leon County sucks in this particular area. And once we identify what those gaps are, then we look at the measures. I mean, this is technical terminology, but we're going to go back and we're going to look at the measures. We're going to say, which of these measures are appropriate to be able to show performance, increased performance in this area. That's the plan. So I honestly believe that we're just asking for what is the standard of care to show performance in these areas. And we want them to clearly define that. Once we find out what those gaps are, then we look at those gaps and we can determine, do these measures really hit to what it is that we want to do? If not, then I say, let's go back and find some really key measures that really hone in to what our specific needs are. So I think this is a good summary of what are the key things that we need to be looking for. It's a good starting point. And I think the gap analysis, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, but the gap analysis will really hone in as to what we need to focus on. And does this particular measure, then that's when I would go to those sub-measures. I will go to that laundry list of sub-measures and say, these are the measures under this particular area that really gets to what we need to look for based on the gap within our community. So they've given me a starting point with these. I'm now going to look for the gap analysis. And once I see these are where the holes are, let's go through those sub-measures and say, we need a vendor that could provide information and data on these particular things to show an impact in our society. I'm going to go to, well, I'm sorry, Terrence. I promised Terrence like 10 minutes ago
And I
that he
also-
can speak.
And I
Okay.
also had my hand up.
You did?
as well.
Okay, I apologize. Then I promise I'll come
I
to
think
you.
you answered the
Okay.
one question that I had about what you want us to go on today.
Yes.
So this is ultimately down here is information that you just want us to give a vote to approve you all to assist this with kind of driving the gap analysis. And that will then set the tone when we get the needs assessment of, hey, we compared all this, we got your permission, let us go hone in on these here. And then we'll be able to filter down through that needs assessment gap analysis. Hey, this is what we've come up with.
Correct.
With you all giving us permission. Is that accurate on?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. And then the other thing is, I just want to give some positive feedback. I love the logo. Are you good? I see what we voted on
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
here
it's right there.
as, so I thought that was great. And I also think that the theory of change, how it's written, if we focus on what we specify, I know at the end we put other services, but I think if we focus on how we laid that out, when we get this gap analysis, the needs assessment, and let that drive what we focus on, I think too, we'll stay on track. So I feel better. I wasn't sure, like Ms. McFadden, what we were voting on, but now I understand. I just didn't understand why you needed us to vote.
That's what
Yeah.
I didn't understand
Yeah.
until now.
Because we want to make sure that we have measures in line that, so I don't want, once that gap analysis comes, then we say, oh, let's go find some measures. The measures are identified up front. These are areas that we need to focus on. And then and we have all of the subdomains underneath it. So the legwork has already been done. Once the gap analysis comes in, then we know what to hone in on. So it's saving us time on the back end if we have these measures identified up front. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Okay.
I get it now as
Okay.
well. One of the things I wanted to also add that provides me with a great degree of comfort. Before we started the process, I was concerned about an out-of-town firm having the ability to have the type of connectivity in a community that the business itself did not exist. When I saw that one of your principal subcontractors was United Partners for Human Services, an organization that I was one of the inaugural members of some years ago, when we organized all the human service agencies and the safety net across this community, I know that they have a genuine pulse. And when I saw those list of vendors, Mr. Mitchell is indeed correct. There is a capacity issue for a number of those firms, but the lion's share of them, by virtue of their already existing requirements, one through CHSP, which is a process many of us are aware of that is data-driven. Those same vendors in UPHS, and this also provides us with another degree of comfort, are already participating in Ms. Bernice Cox's ALICE report on an annual basis that we do for you, or on a semi-annual basis through United Way. So we will be able to see in real time here in a context far different than what that data has meant when it's been collected in the past. Now we have the great luxury of now being able to take that data and now be able to provide a response to it. They are indeed our vendors, but right now, as a part of this process, there are providers. They are the persons who we're counting on, who are daily engaged with these families and the children who are in those families, providing those services. And one of the things I too get caught up and lost with jargon. And I'm even worse with acronyms, right? But there's a lot of jargon found here. But one of the things that also provides me with another level of comfort as a person who's recently been overwhelmed with jargon as a rookie school board member, these are phrases and terms that are not necessarily entirely foreign to me or foreign to the persons who we're engaged with in these provider forums. So I'll be honest, I was somewhat worried about, I mean, not worried, but I had my concerns about the process and how we get this done. The fact that UPHS is involved provides me with a great level of comfort because it is a fantastic organization and collective of all the human service providers found in our community. And then to find out that I'm seeing terms that I know are not entirely unfamiliar to the superintendent and I, because we're also collecting and tracking that data. So a great deal, some of your, I mean, you will be making different queries through a variety of portals, through both the city, the county, and other agencies like Mark described, who already are collecting some of this data. But then when you will then bring this back to us with what you're now describing, will be described here, then that data takes on a different response, although similarly collected by other sources. So I'm happy to hear you talk about this and put it out loud. And although I did miss a whole lot of your words, and I got a degree in
I was
English,
trying to
and I still miss
throw
some
it
of
all
your
in there.
words. But this conversation, I think, is well timed. I'm glad that the executive committee has brought you here and our former committee chairs brought you here to provide some clarity, particularly as we continue through the process early on.
And if I may, Dr. Glenn, clearly, to go to Councilmember Jones' comment regarding jargon. So clearly we will also be adding, and there will be in there a definitions page so that there is a clear understanding of the words that are being used, phrases that are being used, so that it will begin to make sense. And then next, when you are approving these, and so we had discussion about it, it really is with the understanding that as more information becomes available, we add that. Or if it's determined that this indicator, this subdomain really doesn't speak to what it is we're looking to effectuate, then we remove that. So it is being approved with flexibility, if you will, so that that work can continue and it continues to be dynamic.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that point. Okay, Mr. O'Brien, and then we'll go to Ms. McFadden.
You mentioned that we are prompting people who visit the website to participate in the survey. That's a pretty limited audience because I don't think most people are maybe even aware.
11.
So going to Mr. Mitchell's.
May I just quickly respond to that?
What's that?
I just wanted to, at one of the meetings, the superintendent Hannah offered us to use Focus, and we are working with Miss Bruner, who's in the office right now, in the space right now, as well as I believe her name is Lisa, and that will be going out through Focus. I'm hoping tomorrow, maybe Monday, but going out. So I just wanted to let you know.
Just as a voice of experience, I think United Way, when they were going through their process, they solicited input from the community through a similar type of a survey. And I believe that they use the Democrat and as well as the Capital Outlook as vehicles to promote that survey. So we may want to expand it beyond just, what's right in front of us.
Thank you for that. And there was an article that Anna posted, I believe it was Tuesday morning, and there's going to be follow-up articles. And we have shared it with Capital Outlook, but I'll do some official one-on-one connections to push that as well. Thank you. And I'm hoping, since the providers are in the audience, that they'll also share it out with their folks, maybe.
Ms. McFadden.
I'm going to go back to the focus group issue. I noticed in the contract, it with UPHS, it does say specifically CBOs, community-based organizations. And I know I've brought this up several times before, that I think is really important. So for example, Ron Sachs has done an adoption campaign. Karen Moore's PR agency is very involved in juvenile justice issues and so forth. And so I don't see the public relations groups that we've talked about trying to include. I don't see any technology groups which do some fantastic work helping, to make a change. And so I am worried that the for-profit groups are getting left out. I didn't even see the for-profit hospital, but I did see the nonprofit hospital. So as much as it's great that UPHS sent it out to obviously all their folks, because I'm with you. I knew every single group, I think, on that slide, but I did not see the for-profit groups that I really, really want to see engaged.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I was just going to add that we do have another series of focus groups, and we could just make sure that as we're sending those invites out, that
Yeah, I think they were totally missed.
So
I
in-
would love to see them be engaged.
I know that.
Absolutely. And they're, so I want to be clear that it's not, the invitations did not just go to the members of UPHS, that we have a whole nother list through other partners that have provided us with contact details, and those invitations have gone out. Also, as further conversations have come up, Amanda, who's a member of the QQ team, probably gets multiple emails from me each day saying, not only please add them to the invitation list, but go ahead and please send them the provider survey list, because we know that they're involved. So for example, the for-profit hospital, we just made that connection formally, and so that they're sharing it out with the partners that they're working with, and as others come in. If there are community
Like some
members.
For-profit childcare.
Absolutely.
centers. I think the chamber could maybe help you guys get it out, you know, some groups like that. That would be awesome.
Yep. Duly noted.
I have a
Yes, go
question.
ahead.
You know, thinking about my line of work in Title I schools, for example, participation and engagement is generally very, very low. But that is the group that we want to reach the most. So when you think about the data that you'll get, the data will say that our kindergartners are not prepared for school, but there's a story behind it. And the story comes from the parents that are not going to see this on social media. They don't read the newspaper. So what is the incentive with these groups that are reaching out? What is the incentive to get parents that I'm describing to participate and share?
I do want to add that we included a incentive of $50 gift card. And the reason that we did that is, one, you know, we recognize that folks are taking their time out of their day to come out and meet us, and finding a location that they can be able to come talk to us. So we do have that incentive. When we do begin the focus group, we do share that, you know, the thought is, we share a little bit about CSC. We share a little bit about hearing from them sort of the services that they've received, and maybe some of them haven't received those services. And so I want to say that we included that incentive because we realized that, you know, folks sometimes have to leave work to come out and have a conversation with us. And so that's one of the things that we wanted to make sure we added.
Do we have any more questions? Yes.
I have one question. Dr. Williams, you don't have, well, maybe you can't answer this. Dr. Glenn, you kept referring to the fact we are not moving the final due date.
Correct.
When is the final due date of our needs assessment?
Oh, Holly,
June 30th.
thank you. It's
June
June
30th.
30th.
There will be a presentation at the June meeting, the 16th, I believe is the date. Don't quote me on that. It's the third Thursday.
So we're going to present before it's due?
But they will do the presentation, and if there's any final closeout, it's officially over on June 30th. But the goal is that the final report will be to you with the presentation on June 16th.
Okay.
Any other questions for Dr. Williams?
Thank you so much, Dr.
Okay.
Williams, for being with us.
So before we move forward, now I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with this resolution that I'm going to bring forward. And I do want to make sure everybody's aware that there is flexibility involved with this, because we're not saying these are the only measures that we're going to stick to. But what we are proposing is that the council approve the theory of change as it was presented today. Oh, we'll come to the comments. Okay, we need public comments. I apologize. Public comments. Do we have any?
Yes, we have a speaker, Miss Emily Fritz, and if there's others, please give an indication to turn in a card.
Thank you very much. Some of the committee members have already expressed some of the comments I was going to make, which I was pleased to hear. Yes, I think this document is great, but it's a little unrealistic to think that you can accomplish all of this. So do think it needs to be whittled down and prioritized, and hopefully the needs assessment will help you with prioritizing. I also think that the metrics should be very specifics with numbers. And here's an example of one. For instance, and I don't know what that document that I haven't seen yet says. Maybe it says this, but it says increase the number of children who score a 500 or above on the school readiness test from 62% to 70% by 2020, increased to 75% by 2026. Those are the kind of examples of goals that I have seen, because goals need to be specific and measurable. And of course, that is tracked by the Department of Education. Now, have they changed that, Rocky?
So
we
that's
still-
not, the purpose of public comment is to make comments.
Okay, I'm
not to
sorry.
ask
My
questions.
apologies. Well, to the best of my knowledge, they're still doing the school readiness test. If I'm wrong, I'm sure Mr. Hannah will correct me. But you have the data, baseline data from all the state agencies that track it, and they update their data every year. So this data is, some of it can be easy to track. But if you assign a number, like I said, a specific number, increased by 5%, increased by 10%, by a deadline. I'm sure you've all heard about making objectives SMART, make them specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I think that is a recommendation on that. And I know you're passing or voting on a very generic plan at this point in time. And I hope that when the needs assessment is done, you'll be able to fine tune it a little better and make the goals very specific and measurable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Glenn, back to you.
Oh, sorry. We also
Oh,
have
wait,
another
another
comment
one.
from Mr. Jack Levine.
Mr. Levine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I have a three-letter response to what I heard in the last hour, which is, wow. It's a whole lot. My singular point is multi-generational. So I hear time after time about the term parents, but we all know that we are multi-generational in our households, in our community, and lots of times in our responsibilities to our children. So I'm not sure, I have not spoken to Dr. Williams about this, but I will follow up, of course, that we recognize that we are really talking about parents, grandparents, and other family caregivers or other kinship. Now, on that point, I want to make sure that we are aware that not everyone of a certain age is also technology adept. So if we're going to go through a process whereby we are asking for online surveys or other kinds of items that may or may not be user-friendly to some of us who are so challenged. I don't know the solution to that, but I'm sure there is one. And I'm very much looking forward to the schedule of the open forums. I'll be eager to be all ears at those events. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Levine. Any other public comment? Any other public
No
comment?
further comment.
No further comments.
Back
Are we
to
good?
you.
Back to you.
Okay, all right, just making sure. Thank you. No worries, thank you. Okay, so what I would like to move is that the council approve the theory of change, which is this document here, as it was presented today to you all. And then also to approve the list of key outcomes and the impact measures by priority area, with the understanding that this list may change. I want to make sure everybody's aware that that flexibility is there. This list may change based on any new research, any new data, and also based on the outcomes of our gap analysis and the specificity of what it is that we need to look for. But these are the general areas that they have identified for us that are key benchmarks that usually track or showcase performance within these particular areas. So I'm hoping that you all are comfortable with the work that's been done and comfortable with the identification of these key measures or benchmarks for these areas.
Dr. Glenn, I would like to make a motion. And I want to make a motion with a request to Ms. Green. And that is, I want to make a motion that we accept kind of everything you just laid out. But I also want to get comfortable. So I printed out all of the information that was sent to me prior to this meeting. And I read every bit of it, and none of it has anything to do with this, which is why I was uncomfortable, because I'm like, wait, you're asking me to vote on something I've never looked at. I feel much more comfortable, after hearing the presentation from QQ. I still have questions. I still probably won't agree on everything, but that's okay. So if you, Ms. Green, could share with us that ridiculously large document that you didn't want everybody printing out, I would like to read it, and I just would like to get comfortable with the ingredients so that when the bowl of chili is served to me, I know how much cumin went into it. So with that, I'd like to move that the council accept the theory of change and the.
And
Second.
Thank you,
outcomes.
Mr.
Thank you.
Jones.
All right.
Yes.
By the way, I love your food allegories.
I'm hungry. I didn't get lunch today. I'm kidding.
I love a food allegory.
More of a doll man, but
Are you?
I'm gonna go with it.
So I did hear a proposal, right? And then also it was second. Do we have any opposition or any discussions?
I have a comment
Yes.
based on this passage. So I'm still stuck on minor children affected by dissolution of marriage. Tell me any child that's not affected by the dissolution of marriage. I don't know. There's just some wording here that I feel
Could be
is
clean.
either not clear or what have you, and that maybe in a month that this comes back to us. I don't mind agreeing with it, but there's like things that are repeated twice. It's sloppy, a little bit sloppy, not hugely sloppy, but a little bit. And I would like to have that specificity put in, or that opportunity for everybody here to provide some feedback and then come back one more time to us, looking maybe a little bit sharper. And maybe that's something that's ongoing.
Okay. Let's hear from the judge.
Is the guidance that we're giving to QQ really that we understand the general process that they're going, that it follows the priorities that we established, and that at a summary high level,
Yes.
this is consistent with the direction that we established really when we set up the needs assessment committee.
Absolutely. It's making sure that we all are comfortable with the theory of change that's been laid out and how these measures have been identified, understanding that process and that they align with our priorities. We are comfortable with the way that was done, and that these are benchmarks that they have identified that we would consider once those gap analysis comes back and we see the specific needs within the community.
Right, because the document that I'm focusing on is this document. I, of course, can't dispute that there's repeated, the same phrases accidentally repeated in the other document. But this document is like a high level executive summary kind of a document.
So it's this document, it is not this document?
This is a theory of change document that we would like to move forward as, let's approve this, that we can share this with others. This is our theory of change.
If Judge,
Help
if I
me
may.
out, Dr. Ms. Green, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that when we provide the document that Mr. Mitchell referred to, that big, large document, I think that it's going to provide the clarification that Mrs. McFadden is wanting. One of the reasons you saw duplication here is because some of those subdomains were applicative to several pieces. And so we were trying to figure out how to present it without it looking overwhelming. Hindsight is 20/20, and we should have gone back and just pulled all of that up and let you see it so that it would make more sense. That being said, I think when we provide it to you, it's going to make a lot more sense.
But this is the executive summary that the motion applies to.
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
All right. That being said, I'm comfortable.
Any other dissent?
So there's a motion and a second, and it sounds like everybody's
Sounds like we've
comfortable moving forward, but Ms. Green is going to get us.
She's going to get us the detailed information so you all can look at those specific subdomains. There are many of them, and there are a lot of them, but I think that provides the specificity that y'all are looking for. And there was discussion about printing it, and it was like, it's going to take so many pages, but I do hear the council asking loudly to see those.
Outstanding.
Okay. All right, so it's my understanding that we have accepted our theory of change document and that we have accepted these general benchmark areas with the understanding that those can be changed and we can move forward with this work. And you will provide the detailed information.
Electronically. You don't need to print it. Unlike Mr.
Outs-
Levine.
Outstanding. So that brings us
We're done.
to the next item.
Yes.
And thank you, Dr. Glenn, for your spectacular leadership. And Dr. Williams, thank you so much for your all your work and your team's work and for the presentation. On to the treasurer's report. Mr. Mitchell, you're recognized.
Oh, do we have money? That's my report. I am going to be very brief. Really just kind of, if anybody's got questions, I'm happy to give an answer or ask Ms. Green to comment on it. You will see that we have begun collecting an awful lot of taxpayers' hard-earned dollars. And as we keep talking about what we're going to do, it's really what the taxpayers have empowered us to do by the creation of this council. And there is an awful lot of money that is coming in that I think will be put to good use. So that's the large dollar amount, which we haven't seen in the past, but we now see because of the collection of property taxes. As Ms. Green stated, we have repaid the loan. While the county was generous enough to offer us $400,000, we only took $150,000. We have repaid that with the interest that was required, and so we are up to speed on that. Again, we haven't paid it back, but the taxpayers have paid back their own money. There's really nothing else that stood out to me. So I don't want to speak for you all. If you've got questions about the budget, happy to answer it. Do remember this. And with every budget, you're going to see the percentage of the total budget and where we are. We're really in, we've just finished the first quarter of the year. So we're going to look flush with cash. And oh, by the way, because we haven't decided on how to spend the money, we're going to remain flush with cash, at least for the foreseeable future. So the percentages are always going to look very positive, with few exceptions where we are front loading a contract, for example. Anyhow, so don't be fooled by the percentage. Wow, look at us. We are way under budget. It's only one quarter. We still have 3 more to go. So with that, I offer up the budget and am happy to answer any questions that someone might have.
Is there a motion to accept the
Public comment.
financial report? Well, not so fast, Ms. McFarland.
Oh, public comment.
Anytime before we make a vote, we need to open it up for public comment per our public comment policy. However, I just wanted to put it on the record that there's currently no cards submitted for this.
Speak now, speak now. Public comment on our financial report. Seeing none, is there a motion? Moved by Mr. O'Brien. Is there a second? Seconded by Principal Connor. Any discussion, any questions, any objections? We'll show the financial reports accepted by or approved by the council.
Judge Sosholm, I will point out that that Anna from the Tallahassee Democrat did call me, and I had a few questions that I went through with her yesterday. So again, for the taxpayers who might be listening to this, please know that at least the Tallahassee Democrat has assigned someone to it, and she had really smart questions of which I had to scratch my head and say, hold on just a second, give me a minute, let me flip through this. But just so you know.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Mitchell. All right, draft council policies for review is next on the agenda. First, the investment policy, which is at page 70, starts at page 71 of the package. Mr. Granger, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Talking about resolution 2022-03, which begins in your packet at page 73. Florida statutes require that public entities such as the CSC have investment policies. The chapter that requires that also says if you don't want to have a written investment policy, you can adopt alternative investment guidelines. Staff is recommending that the council adopt those alternate investment guidelines, because if you have a written policy, it also entails retaining money managers or financial advisors and dedicating the time and money to doing the due diligence of the council and overseeing all of their activities and approving them. The alternative investment guidelines that are in the statute allow entities, and there are currently about 700 in the state of Florida who have adopted this policy, that it limits the investment vehicles through which the council can put surplus money over and above operational dollars. As spelled out in the resolution, those alternative vehicles are the local government surplus trust fund, which has 700 members, over 700 at this point, registered money market funds, interest-bearing time deposits, which is what Ms. Green invested the money in the other day at the bank into a money market, and direct obligations of the U.S. Treasury. With that being said, the SBA actually runs the local government surplus trust fund. It had 740 clients as of April 30th of last year. And as of April 30th last year, the value of the fund was $18.3 billion. And over the 12-month period ending April 30th, the fund earned a return of 3.1%. Which outperformed what the goal was by almost 3 times. With that being said, Your Honor, that's the overview of Resolution 2022-03.
So 2022-03, just to recap, Mr. Granger would adopt the alternative investment guidelines?
Yes, sir.
All right.
We are required to basically enact some sort of investment policy, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So we have to do that.
We either do the money
Do this, we have to
manager.
create our own
Yeah.
very distinct, complicated.
Yes.
And the reality is, Mr. O'Brien, even if we did it, it's based on statute, which is based on the alternative. It's
For clarification's sake, we have to do something. This seems like the most reasonable approach. So I will move the resolution.
All right, so there's a motion. Is there a second?
Do we need public comment on this?
Oh.
Yeah.
Public comment on the investment policy. Do we have any comment cards?
No cards have been submitted and
Yeah.
our audience members are shaking their head no.
I will point out, as Mr. Granger did mention, the State Board of Administration, the SBA, has done well. I will point out that they also suffered miserably back several years ago, and an awful lot of local governments, Leon County School Board being, or school district being one of them, tried desperately to get their money out and couldn't. And so State Board of Administration is under different leadership than it was at the time, and the time and conditions are different. I am much more of a proponent of that than I am. Ms. Green needed a place to put it, and certainly a money market account, but I don't know if any of you all have money market accounts, but it is certainly not yielding 3%. So with that, I second the motion.
Moved by O'Brien, seconded by Mitchell. Any other discussions or questions regarding the investment policy? Ms. McFadden, you are recognized.
So I've written a lot of investment policies for nonprofit groups, and I'm chair endowment committees, so I'm very familiar with all this. And I would just like to say, moving forward, not right now because we need to do something now, then this is a quick fix. But I would be more than happy to invest some time and create that investment policy statement and work with the team to, we should move in that direction. It makes more sense and more money.
Fair enough. Thank you so much. Any other comments, discussions, questions? Any objection? The motion is to accept or approve resolution or adopt resolution 2022-03. Seeing no objections, we'll show the resolution adopted unanimously. That brings us to
Chair, if I may ask.
not so fast.
No, I just have a question for Mr. Granger. Can you tell me the numbers you have from SBA again? Because they don't align. No, I know that. The return was at the 3.1%.
3.1%.
That was last year?
Was as of, yes, April 30th, 2021.
And is that and this may be something different, Mr. Hannah, in the local government investment pool, is that number, or is it the SBA as a whole, which invests all of the pension funds for current and former state employees?
It's the local government surplus.
Okay, so that.
Well, then my folks don't have, they're telling me it's like 0.5% right now. So that's fine. I mean, I'll go back and talk to my people. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hannah. All right. The motion passes. Resolution 2022-03 is adopted by the council. Next is talent and culture, talent selection, team member conduct, attendance, and leave policy. Ms. McPhail, you are recognized.
As you heard our executive director share, we are growing and expanding. And as our next meeting, we'll have another team member on board. And with that comes the establishment of human resource policies. So what you have before you is just draft. We're not asking you to take any action on this. Our intent is that we will be bringing this to you during the February meeting and asking for your approval. And we will provide this in a format to you that if you would like to provide comments and come prepared to the next meeting, or in between submit your comments to staff, you may. We can also take notes here. In the 3 policies that are drafted before you, talent selection is documenting the process by which we mostly followed, almost identically followed for the selection of our executive director, and did follow for the selection of the office manager. And so it's putting pen to paper and documenting that out. The second one that is before you talks about team member conduct. And so these include some statutory language of policies related to workplace harassment, equal opportunity, things of that nature that are required, that local governments are required to adhere to. And so they're all spelled out there, including some procedures for which they might be followed. And then the final one is related to attendance and leave as we bring on staff. In addition to our executive director, enumerating what that attendance and leave policy might be. Now, I would like to just kind of thank the Leon County, being partners with Leon County and kind of pulling from them, or having been partners at the beginning of our inception with Leon County and having that relationship with them, really building on the language and learning from them and the pieces that they have. So the attendance and leave policy did model, for the most part, the Leon County government, especially as it relates to hours of accrual, leave, sick leave, things of that nature. Of course, Leon County is a much larger organization than we are. So they have really cool things like sick leave programs and banking opportunities for lots of different things that are not included in this version, since our organization is much smaller. So at this time, I would love to open it up to any questions that you might have or immediate comments, but know that we are not asking for any action to be taken today on this particular policy, but it's setting us up to have policies in place as we move forward February onwards.
So general discussion, guidance to the staff, questions, Mr. Mitchell.
How are we advertising positions?
So in addition, in the same way that we did for our executive director.
Just tell me how we're doing. I don't.
Sure. On our website, Indeed and LinkedIn. We did not feel it was fruitful using ZipRecruiter last time. It was incredibly expensive and didn't get a lot of candidates, but through Indeed and LinkedIn, we did.
So I wonder if, and I wish Commissioner Cummings was here, because I wonder if there's a way, no offense to all of those entities, but again, I don't think that, if there's a way that we can somehow put any positions that we are going to hire with the county because when people are looking for a job, they will go to the state website, they'll go to a local government website. I don't think they go to LinkedIn. Again, with all due respect to the people who may have applied for the position of office manager, usually when you hear of a job that's out there, people are like, hey, I saw that you guys are posting. Just kind of curious, or a suggestion that we see if we can piggyback on other large employers where people are going more frequently looking for employment opportunities.
Ms. McPhail, you recognize, you want to respond, or Ms. Green? As far as-
Yes,
Yeah,
it's good.
either one. So yes,
Thanks.
that being said, we had more than 80 applicants for the office manager position, just for your information. The other thing is when I come back with these proposed staffing plan, I can put just a little information on there on advertising for those positions and what that would cost, because I think that's going to be important. And Mr. Mitchell, I'm telling you, you're in my head all the time, making sure that we're being really, really good stewards of this money. And so if there's a way for us to do it without paying too much money, we want to do that. At the same time, we want to make sure we are getting a very, very talented candidate pool.
Mr. Granger will tell you that how I'm not in your head enough. Because the idea of bringing on staff, and I'm glad we're having this conversation. We have no programs to monitor. The idea of bringing on staff, office manager, definitely, I'm big thumbs up on that. But prior to needing them, that if you want to get in my head, that will drive me crazy of making sure we have a need for someone before we spend money on a position. That's important to me.
Absolutely. And it definitely is not my plan to hire people to sit.
Right.
So
I know it's not.
we definitely are on the same page with that. I think the bigger thing that I'm thinking about, just since we're having this discussion, is so staff participated in all of the provider forums, and we will participate just as listeners. We don't interject in the ones that are coming up. Even some of our larger providers, once we determine what our key outcome measures are going to be and what data we want to see to support those and move the needle, there is a capacity issue. I can tell you that right now. And so we literally would be looking at what is that solution from a staffing perspective or a contracting perspective to help build that capacity and have those builder forums. So I just want to put that out there, but you are in my head. Please know that it is a
Good.
very special place. And
I'm not sure I see
and
it
I
that
am
way.
glad that it is there, and
Good.
that just adds to that mental Rolodex piece. Absolutely.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Any other comments regarding the personnel policies? Seeing no takers. Excellent. Thank you so much for that report. Next is information technology, Ms. McPhail.
So I want to be super clear that this proposed policy, again, following the same format, we're not asking you to take any action today, but to be in front of you, is not a full, complete information technology and security policy. This is, we're starting to buy equipment and we need to make sure that they're registered and secure and located in our Azure endpoint device management system that is cloud-based. So this is really just, hey, we're buying stuff and some policies about making some assignments. So again, this is not the full piece, but will be just as we own endpoints. So this not only includes laptop computers, but also external hard drives that we might have purchased. And the security measures that you see outlined, which are fairly simple, are for any contractors who might be doing work with us as well. So for example, my computer, Mr. Granger's computer, following these protocols. And then as we transfer that data onto a secure endpoint, an external hard drive in this example, that they're following these protocols and that they're being registered into our device management system.
Very good. So we'll look forward to that at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yes, we could have more further conversation. And just to reiterate, these will be provided to you in a format that if you would like to provide comments in between the two meetings, that we can incorporate into it.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks so much. Yes, Ms. McFadden.
Question on our insurance, and maybe this is something as you're moving forward with the information technology policy. Do we have a cybersecurity insurance package in place?
I had not
We have
even,
D&O.
so, so I'm sorry, it's just so funny because you caught me right where I was going to say for our next meeting, we are going to ask our insurance provider to come and detail the types of insurance we already have and also the insurance that they believe we need to have as a council. We will add cyber security insurance because that was not something that we thought about, but at the next meeting, when we get to the agenda, we will do that.
Yeah, I think right now, cybersecurity, especially with the kind of data we're going to be taking in, is going to be critical.
Absolutely. I will say, and I think we might have reported at this on the last meeting that we were approved as a government entity with Microsoft. So we are setting up our entire server system cloud-based using the Azure. It's AZURE, and if you're not familiar with that, it's the platform. And that was also a recommendation that we received from Leon County and went through that whole process of getting approved to be at that level. So their server system has each of those elements of additional security. I know that's not what you're asking about. You're asking specifically about the insurance, but all of the mechanisms in place to protect us outside of the insurance are part of that package that we have with Microsoft.
Thank you. Any other comments? Information technology. Seeing no takers, we'll look forward to that report at the next meeting and the policy between now and then. Next on the agenda, the next meeting date. Our next meeting is Thursday, February 17, 2:00 p.m. in this same room. Is that correct, Mr. Phil?
That is correct. And up on the screen, we do have the proposed dates for our Program Services Committee as well. There will be a follow-up email going out on that through that committee as well.
Outstanding. So February 10th is the Program Services Committee chaired by Dr. Glenn. February 17th, the next council meeting, March 24th, the following, another Program Services Council meeting, April 7th, and a full council meeting on April 21st. Excellent. Next meeting agenda, proposed staffing plan and organizational chart, like we talked about earlier. We'll add insurance discussion to that. Proposed office space information and contract. A budget amendment for staffing and office setup. And then the community conversations, invitations, and the planning for those opportunities for us to hear from the community. Any other matters for the agenda next month? Seeing no takers. Yes.
Judge, we're going to add HR policies. I think we're
Oh,
going to
yes.
have those ready. That's in there. I think that's it.
Excellent. HR policies, yes. All right, very good. So that'll be our next agenda for the next meeting, and that brings us to a special presentation, starting off by me. Seems like a long time ago when we started. It was really scary. Terrence, you weren't there. Walter, I'm so glad you're here.
Happy anniversary.
If Walter, if you hadn't been there at that first meeting, I don't know if I'd have come to the second meeting. You know, it's like Field of Dreams. You remember that movie, Field of Dreams? If you build it, they will come. Well, it was a leap of faith for a lot of us. Leap of faith. Didn't know how it was going to turn out. And we built it and people started coming. We came, amazingly enough. And then somebody else came and had he not showed up, what is that you're wearing? Had he not showed up, I'm not sure we would be here today. I know we wouldn't have any money in the bank had Ted Granger not showed up. And he was we gave him a really great bureaucratic name, interim administrator, a name that means nothing to no one. And when I was thinking about, I wanted to give you something, Ted, and I got you this. This is the leftover wrapping paper from the Christmas holidays at my house. My wife wrapped it, not me, because I'm not competent. And I gave it to you, and we can be sure you will be our founding interim administrator, and that makes you the GOAT, the greatest of all time. Glad that nobody else is in the room, really. Honestly, I'm glad, because these are the people who bled for this organization. These are the people who made this commitment. You didn't get us over the finish line exactly. We don't have any money on the street yet, but you built the foundation. You built the foundation. This present is a GOAT present. Here, you come up and open this present. And it's a literal GOAT present when you see it. Oh, we got to open it now. That's part of the punchline.
You know, it's great being the GOAT when you're the only one. It's not really hard to do.
Well, there's only one Tom Brady.
That's right. It's exactly right.
One Ted Brady.
It's basically the same thing. I think you're younger than Tom Brady.
Yeah.
So this is a cashmere cardigan. It's a sweater made out of hair donated by a goat. That's exactly right.
I love it.
So you know that means something to me. Thank you, Ted. Thank you for what you've done for us.
Yeah.
And Judge Shostrom, if you will.
And now I would like to recognize Terence Watts for a presentation.
Yeah, so I don't need to follow that up. I did want to say something about Ted. And so give me a moment. So I want to introduce Mr. Theodore, AKA Ted Rockstar Granger. I have been inspired by a lot of people in this room, but I have been very inspired by Ted. He is our first interim administrator of the Children's Services Council of Leon County. He has over 25 years experience with the United Way of Florida, where he was CEO. He has experience working with the Florida Chamber, and some of you may not know, but he's also a professional handyman. Mr. Granger left retirement to serve a mission dear to his heart, or in his own words, an issue that winds his clock. Those issues are early learning issues. I watched a television interview, Our Issues with Ted Granger. I was trying to prepare for this. My intent was to learn more about him, and then I saw it was 23 minutes and I started to reconsider. I did watch the whole thing. It felt like 5 minutes. I don't know if you practiced before that interview, but you knew your stuff. He knew the ins and outs of the council, the purpose, the vision, the timeline. You were prepared. And I thought about this. You can pretend to be intelligent, but for so long, Ted Granger is intelligent. You can pretend to be passionate, but for so long, Ted Granger, you are passionate. You can pretend to be hardworking and diligent, but for so long, Ted, you are diligent and hardworking. This one is very important to me, this quality, so excuse one slang word for this presentation. You can pretend to be chill. Ted Granger, you are chill.
That's what the sweater's for.
That's what the sweater's for. The moment I knew you were chill, we were coming in the parking lot. I said, Ted, how you doing? He said, I'm jam up and jelly tight. But it felt right and I liked it. Yeah. And so, at the end of that interview, and I'm finished, you said this was the only role you would come out of retirement for at the end of that interview. And I picked your brain before because I was impressed by you. And I was like, man, what did you used to do? Blah, blah, blah. And I have a feeling that you're going to eat those words. So thank you. Thank you for inspiration. They also got you a flannel shirt. You guys might not know the flannel shirts. He rocks these flannel shirts. He was at our alliance meeting on Zoom. And I was like, man, he's got a black and white flannel shirt on.
Well said, Terrence. Well said.
You have to open
Thank
the
you.
box.
You gotta open the box.
Apparently, the consensus of the council, Ted, is you don't know how to dress.
This is my suit.
So while he opens the little memento, so we got him a flannel shirt, but when I started now 2 weeks and 4 days ago, every day he was chill, just very chill, and wore a different color flannel shirt.
No, it was not a different color.
It was the same one. I didn't want to say that, but it was the same flannel shirt. And so Holly and I decided we would pay homage by putting our flannel shirts on. And every time we wear these shirts, we will think about you, Ted. I cannot thank you personally enough for making the onboarding process into this position. I don't know that it could have been more smooth. It was like drinking from a fire hose, but I tell you, you pull the water back whenever I looked over like I was just drowning. And my only requirement, my only request is that when you see my number, you always pick the phone up. Thank you so much.
Yes.
So public comment. We have how much time till 5? No. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this. This is Ted Granger in recognition of your time and dedication to the establishment of the Children's Service Council of Leon County, May 21 to January 22. It's been an honor and a pleasure, a real honor and a real pleasure working with each and every one of you. And it's been an honor because we came a long way, but we couldn't have done it. You couldn't have done it without the commitment and the hard work and the dedication that each and every one of you put into this. I think the taxpayers of Leon County got more than a bang for their buck when you all were sworn into these positions. And I congratulate you for that. It's just been one of my greatest honors to see how you guys work, not only substantively, but there aren't very many public bodies in this country that act as collegially and with as much respect as you do with each other. And I just so respect that. You asked a question earlier. There are harder times coming, a lot harder times coming. The pigs are going to be at the trough, and I don't mean that negatively, but the trough is little, and they all won't be able to get it. And those are going to be some of the hardest things that you guys do as a council. It's been a real pleasure for me too, because I walk away from here with 11 new friends. Thank you.
Any member comments? Any additional comments? Any member comments? Any member comments? Ted, you should jam up.
So in honor of Jam Up and Jelly Tight,
That needs to go
we
on
have
the
made a
logo.
beautiful presentation of some red raspberry preserves directly for Mr. Granger here. And in addition, in case you haven't had the opportunity of working with him or responding to things or asking him for things, or you respond to something, he has a phrase that he always responds when he's excited about something, and it's dig it. So to eat his jam or his jelly, we have some gold shovels so he can dig it into his Jam Up and Jelly Tight. Thank you for everything.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Anything else from anyone else?
Just
Seeing no
from-
takers. Wait, not so fast.
I have one thing, and I started to do something that I think would have violated government sunshine, and it relates to office space. Superintendent was generous enough to offer space to us as we are, and I know this is going to come back at the next meeting. And I am hoping, Superintendent, that that you will work with our Executive Director, Ms. Green, to see if there's some office space, maybe closer to downtown, that would work where we're not, if you have open space, I guess is what I'm saying, that we're not shelling out extra cash. And I did not want to pick up the phone and call. I started to, and I'm like, oops, this is an item that will come before the board, even though it doesn't cost $1. I just wanted to put it out there publicly that I hope we can work with the school district to find some space. And I thank you, Judge, for letting me do that.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Any other member comments? Dr. Glenn, you're recognized.
We love you, Ted. I just want to say that publicly. Thank you so very much for your mentorship and your friendship, and God bless you. Just wanted to say it. Thank you.
Love you.
Oh, well said, Dr. Glenn. All right, if there's nothing further, we are.
I do have one thing, Judge,
Not
because
so
I've been on my finance people since he said that. They claim it is 0.31 of 1%. So not 3.1%. Because
Need clarification next week.
anyway,
Yeah.
I don't want to be Debbie Downer at the end of our meeting because I was going off with the finance people about, wait a minute, 3%, that's awesome.
Yeah.
But anyway, Ted,
Mr.
thank you
Chair.
so much.
Yes, Mr. Jones, you're recognized.
Mr. Granger, some people may pretend to like you, but I genuinely like you. It has been a real pleasure to work with you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you,
I'm
Darrell.
using that, I promise you.
Now.
Your Honor, I will contact the SBA and tell them to correct their website.
I'm afraid Mr. Hannah may be correct. We are adjourned. Thank
There
you,
it
folks.
is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah, that was spot on.
I know.
Man, you too. There's only one more day. It's the best part of the, best part of a long weekend. Short